patches fluttering. His eyes felt grainy, but he made himself speak lightly. A good morning to you. Straightening, he knuckled his long white mustaches grandly. The black and gold-clad servants looked surprised. The two muscular lads straightened from the gold-studded red lacquer chest with the shattered lid that they had been about to lift, and the three women stilled their mops in front of them. The hallway was empty along here, except for them, and any excuse to break their labor was good, especially at this hour. They looked as tired as Tom felt, with slumping shoulders and dark circles under their eyes. A good morning to you, Gleeman, the oldest of the women said. A bit plump and plain-faced, perhaps. She had a nice smile, weary as she was. Can we help you? Tom produced four colored balls from a capacious coat sleeve and began to juggle. I'm just going about trying to raise spirits. The Gleeman must do what he can. He would have used more than four, but he was fatigued enough to make even that many an exercise of concentration. How long since he had nearly dropped the fifth ball? 2 hours? He stifled a yawn, turned it into a reassuring smile. Terrible night. Then spirits need lifting. The Lord Dragon saved us, one of the younger women said. She was pretty and slim, but with a predatory gleam in her dark, shadowed eyes that warned him to temper his smile. Of course, she might be useful if she was both greedy and honest, meaning that she would stay bought once he paid her. It was always good to find another set of hands to place a note, a tongue that would tell him what was heard, and say what he wanted, where he wanted. Fool. You have enough hands and ears, so stop thinking of a fine bosom under the look in her eye. The interesting thing was that she sounded as if she meant what she said, and one of the young fellows nodded agreement to her words. Yes, Tom said. I wonder which High Lord had charge of the docks yesterday. He nearly fumbled the balls in irritation at himself, bringing it right out like that. He was too tired. He should be in his bed. He should have been there hours ago. The docks are the defender's responsibility, the oldest woman told him. You'd not know that, of course. The High Lords would not concern themselves. Tom knew it very well. Is that so? Well, I am not tired, of course. He changed the balls from a simple circle to a double loop. It looked more difficult than it was, and the girl with the predatory look clapped her hands. Now that he was into it, he might as well go on. After this, though, he would call it a night. Night. The sun was rising already. Still, it is a shame no one asked why those barges were at the docks, with their hatches down, hiding all those trollocs. Not that I am saying anyone knew the trollocs were there. The double loop wobbled, and he quickly went back to a circle. He was exhausted. You'd think one of the High Lords would have asked, though. The two young men frowned thoughtfully at one another, and Tom smiled to himself. Another seed planted, just that easily, if clumsily as well. Another rumor started, whatever they knew for a fact about who had charge of the docks. And rumors spread. A rumor like this would not stop short of the city. So it was another small wedge of suspicion driven between commoners and nobles. Who would the commoners turn to, except the man they knew the nobles hated? The man who had saved the stone from Shadow's Fall. Randolph Thorne, the Lord Dragon. It was time to leave what he had sown. If the roots had taken hold here, nothing he said now could pull them loose, and he had scattered other seeds this night. But it would not do for anyone to discover he was the one doing the planting. They fought bravely last night, the High Lords did. Why, I saw. He trailed off as the women leaped to their mopping, and the men grabbed up the chest and hurried away. I can find work for Gleeman, too, the Majira's voice said behind him. Idle hands are idle hands. He turned gracefully, considering his leg, and swept her a deep bow. The top of her head was below his shoulder, but she probably weighed half again what he did. She had a face like an anvil, not improved by the bandage around her temples, an extra chin and deep-set eyes like chips of black flint. A good morning to you, graciously, a small token of this fresh new day. He gestured with a flurry of hands and tucked a golden yellow sunburst blossom, only a little bedraggled for its time up his sleeve, into the gray hair above her bandage. She snatched the flower right out again, of course, and eyed it suspiciously, but that was just as he wanted. He put 3 limping strides into her moment of hesitation, and when she shouted something after him, he neither listened nor slowed. Horrible woman, he thought. If we had turned her loose on the Trollocs, she'd have had them all sweeping and mopping. He yawned behind a hand, jaws creaking. He was too old for this. He was tired, and his knee was a knot of pain. Nights with no sleep, battles, plotting. Too old. He should be living quietly on a farm somewhere, with chickens. Farms always had chickens. And sheep. They must not be difficult to look after. Shepherds seemed to loll about and play the pipes all the time. He would play the harp, of course, not pipes. Or his flute. Weather was not good for the harp. And there would be a town nearby, with an inn, where he could amaze the patrons in the common room. He flourished his cloak as he passed 2 servants. The only point in wearing it in this heat was to let people know he was a gleeman. They perked up at the sight of him, of course, hoping he might pause to entertain for a moment. Most gratifying. Yes, a farm had its virtues. A quiet place. No people to bother him. As long as there was a town close by. Pushing open the door to his room, he stopped in his tracks. Moraine straightened, as if she had a perfect right to be going through the papers scattered on his table, and calmly arranged her skirts as she sat on the stool. Now there was a beautiful woman, with every grace a man could want, including laughing at his quips. Old fool. She's Aes Sedai, and you're too tired to think straight. A good morning to you, Moraine Sedai, he said, hanging his cloak on a peg. He avoided looking at his writing case, still sitting under the table where he had left it. No point in letting her know was important. Probably no point in checking after she went, for that matter. She could have channeled the lock open and closed again. He would never be able to tell. Weary as he was, he could not even remember whether he had left anything incriminating in the case. Or anywhere else, for that matter. Everything he could see in the room was right where it belonged. He did not think he could have been foolish enough to leave anything out. Doors in the servants' quarters had no locks or latches. I would offer you a refreshing drink, but I fear I have nothing but water. I am not thirsty, she said in a pleasant, melodious voice. She leaned forward, and the room was small enough for her to place a hand on his right knee. A chill tingle rippled through him. I wish a good healer had been near when this happened. It is too late now, I regret. A dozen healers would not have been enough, he told her. A half-man did it. I know. What else does she know, he wondered. Turning to pull his lone chair out from behind the table, he bit back an oath. He felt as if he had had a good night's sleep, and the pain was gone from his knee. His limp remained, but the joint was more limber than it had been since he was injured. The woman didn't even ask if I wanted it. Burn me, what is she after? He refused to flex the leg. If she would not ask, he would not acknowledge her gift. An interesting day yesterday, she said as he sat down. I'd not call Trollocs and Halfmen interesting, he said dryly. I did not mean that. Earlier, the High Lord Carlion dead in a hunting accident. His good friend Tadosian apparently mistook him for a boar, or perhaps a deer. I haven't heard. He kept his voice calm. Even if she had found the note, she could not have traced it to him. Carlion himself would have thought it by his own hand. He did not think she could have, but he reminded himself again that she was Aes Sedai. As if he needed any reminding, with that smooth, pretty face across from him, those serene, dark eyes watching him full of all his secrets. The servants' quarters are full of gossip, but I seldom listen. Do you know? She murmured mildly. Then you will not have heard that Tadosian fell ill not an hour after returning to the stone, directly after his wife gave him a goblet of wine to wash away the dust of the hunt. It is said he wept when he learned that she means to tend him herself and feed him with her own hands. No doubt, tears of joy at her love. I hear she has vowed not to leave his side until he can rise again, or until he dies. She knew. How, he could not say, but she knew. But why was she revealing it to him? A tragedy, he said, matching her bland tone. Rand will need all the loyal High Lords he can find, I suppose. Carleon and Tadosian were hardly loyal, even to each other, it seems. They led the faction that want to kill Rand, and try to forget he ever lived. You say so. I pay little attention to such things. The works of the mighty are not for simple women. Her smile was just short of laughter, but she spoke as if reading from a page. Tondril Merlin, called the Grey Fox once by some who knew him, or knew of him, court bard at the royal palace of Andor in Camelin. Morghez's lover for a time, after Tarangale died. Fortunate for Morghez, Tarangale's death. I do not suppose she ever learned he meant her to die, and himself to be Andor's first king. But we were speaking of Tom Meriden, a man who, it was said, could play the game of houses in his sleep. It is a shame that such a man calls himself a simple gleeman. But such arrogance to keep the same. Tom masked his shock with an effort. How much did she know? Too much if she knew not another word. But she was not the only one with knowledge. Speaking of names, he said levelly, it is remarkable how much can be puzzled out from a name. Moraine Damodred, the Lady Moraine of House Damodred in Kyrian, Tarangale's youngest half-sister, King Lemon's niece, and Aes Sedai, let us not forget. And Aes Sedai aiding the dragon reborn since before she could have known that he was more than just another poor fool who could channel. An Aes Sedai with connections high in the White Tower, I would say. Else she'd not risk what she has. Someone in the hall of the tower? More than one, I'd say. It would have to be. News of that would shake the world. But why should there be trouble? Perhaps it's best to leave an old gleeman tucked away in his hole in the servants' quarters. Just an old gleeman playing his harp and telling his tales. Tales that harm no one. If he had managed to stagger her even a fraction, she did not show it. Speculation without facts is always dangerous, she said calmly. I do not use my house name by choice. House Damodred has a deservedly unpleasant reputation before Lemon cut down Alundor Aldera and lost the throne and his life work. Since the Ailu War and his grown wounds, also deservedly. Did you shake the hole? What do you want of me? He demanded irritably. She did not as much as blink. Elaine and Manny take ship for Tanchico today. A dangerous city, Tanchico. Your knowledge and skills might keep them alive. So that was it. She wanted to separate him from Rand, leave the boy naked to her manipulations. As you say, Tanchico is dangerous now, than it always was. I wish the young women well, yet I've no wish to stick my head into a viper's nest. I am too old for that sort of thing. I have been thinking of taking up farming. A quiet life, safe. A quiet life would kill you, I think. Sounding distinctly amused, she busied herself rearranging the folds of her skirt with small, slender hands. He had the impression she was hiding a smile. Tanchico will not, however. I guarantee that. And by the first oath, you know it for truth. He frowned at her despite his best efforts to keep his face straight. She had said it, and she could not lie. But how could she know? He was sure she could not foretell. He was certain he had heard her disavow the talent. But she had said it. Burn the woman. Why should I go to Tonchico? She could do without titles. To protect Elaine, Morghez's daughter. I've not seen Morghez in 15 years. Elaine was an infant when I left Cambridge. She hesitated. When she spoke, her voice was unrelentingly firm. And your reason for leaving outdoor? A nephew named Owen, I believe. One of those poor fools you spoke of who can channel. The Red Sisters were supposed to bring you to Tarvalon, as any such man is. But instead, they gentled him on the spot and abandoned him to the mercies of his neighbors. Tom knocked his chair over standing up, then had to hold on to the table because his knees were shaking. Owen had not lived long after being gentled, driven from his home by supposed friends who could not bear to let even a man who could no longer channel live among them. Nothing Tom did could stop Owen not wanting to live, or stop his young wife from following him to the grave inside the mud. Why? He cleared his throat roughly, tried to make his voice less husky. Why are you telling me this? There was sympathy on Moraine's face, and could it be regret? Surely not. Not from an Aes Sedai. The sympathy had to be false as well. I would not have done had you been willing to go simply to help Elaine and Nynaeve. Why, burn you, why? If you go with Elaine and Nynaeve, I will tell you the names of those Red Sisters when I see you next, as well as the name of the one who gave them their orders. They did not act on their own. And I will see you again. You will survive Tarvalon. He drew an uneven breath. What good will their names do me? He asked in a flat voice. Aes Sedai names, wrapped in all the power of the White Tower. A skilled and dangerous player of the House of Games might find a use for them, she replied quietly. They should not have done what they did. They should not have been excused for it. Will you leave me, please? I will teach you that not all Aes Sedai are like those Reds, Tom. You must learn that. Please. He stood leaning on the table until she was gone, unwilling to let her see him sink awkwardly to his knees, see the tears trickling down his weathered face. Right, Owen. He had buried it all as deeply as he could. I couldn't get there in time. I was too busy with the bloody game of houses. He scrubbed at his face testily. Moraine could play the game with the best, wrenching him around this way, tugging every string he had thought perfectly hidden. Owen, Elaine, Morghez's daughter. Only fondness remained for Morghez. A little more than that. But it was hard to walk away from a child you had bounced on your knee. That girl in Tonchico. That city would eat her alive even without a war. It must be a pit of rabid wolves now. And Moraine will give me the names. All he had to do was leave Rand in Aes Sedai hands, just as he had left Owen. She had him like a snake in a cleft stick, damned however he writhed. Burn the woman.
Looping the embroidery basket's handle over her arm, Min gathered her skirts with her other hand and strolled out of the dining hall after breakfast in a gliding pace, her back straight. She could have balanced a full goblet of wine on her head without spilling a drop. Partly that was because she could not take a proper stride in her dress, all pale blue silk, with a snug bodice and sleeves, and a full skirt that would drag its embroidered hem on the ground if she did not hold it up. It was also partly because she was sure she could feel Laris's eyes on her. A glance back proved her right. The mistress of the kitchen's wine cask on legs was beaming after her approvingly from the dining hall doorway. Who would have thought the woman had been a beauty in her youth, or would have a place in her heart for pretty, flirtatious girls? Lively, she called them. Who would have suspected she would decide to take Elminrida under her stout wing? It was hardly a comfortable position. Laris kept a protective eye on Min, an eye that seemed to find her anywhere in the tower grounds. Min smiled back and patted her hair, now a round black cap of curls. Burned the woman. Doesn't she have something to cook or some scullion to yell at? Laris waved to her, and she waved in return. She could not afford to offend someone who watched her so closely, not when she had no idea how many mistakes she might be making. Laris knew every trick of lively women, and expected to teach Min any she did not already know. One real mistake, Min reflected as she took a seat on a marble bench beneath a tall willow, had been the embroidery, not from Laris's point of view, but her own. Pulling her embroidery hoop from the basket, she ruefully examined yesterday's work, a number of lopsided yellow ox eyes, and something she had meant to be a pale yellow rosebud, though no one would know unless she told them. With a sigh, she set to picking the stitches out. Liana was right, she supposed. A woman could sit for hours with an embroidery hoop, watching everyone and everything, and nobody thought it strange. It would have helped, though, if she had any skill at all. At least it was a perfect morning for being out of doors. A golden sun had just cleared the horizon in a sky where the few fluffy white clouds seemed arrayed to emphasize.
Hey, Fire, how you doing? I'm finishing rolling up a couple.
Roses and ruffled tall calma bushes with their big red or white blossoms. Soon enough, the gravel-covered paths near the tree would be full of people on one errand or another, everyone from Aes Sedai to stablemen. A perfect morning, and a perfect place from which to watch unobserved. Perhaps today she would have a useful viewing. Elmindrida? Min jumped and stuck her pricked finger in her mouth. Twisting round on the bench, she prepared to assail Gawain for sneaking up on her, but the words froze in her throat. Galad was with him. Taller than Gawain, with long legs, he moved with a dancer's grace and a lean, sinewy strength. His hands were long, too, elegant yet strong, and his face. He was, quite simply, the most beautiful man she had ever seen. Stop sucking your finger, Gawain said with a grin. We know you are a pretty little girl. You do not need to prove it to us. Blushing, she hastily pulled her hand down and barely restrained herself from a furious glare that would not have been at all in keeping with Elmindrida. He had needed no threats or commands from the Amerlin to keep her secret, only her asking, but he did take any opportunity to tease that presented itself. It is not right to mock, Gawain, Galad
Got a
said.
couple rolled up
He did
and
not mean to
one
offend
just in case.
Mistress Elmindrida. Your pardon, but can it be we have met before? When you frowned at Gawain so fiercely just then, I almost thought I knew you.
Yep, a back
Min
up.
dropped her eyes demurely. Oh, I could never forget meeting you, my Lord Galad, she said in her best foolish girl voice. The simpering tone and anger at her own slip sent a tide of heat to her hairline, improving her disguise. She did not look anything like herself, and the dress and the hair were only a part of it.
Yep,
Liana
back
had
up. Give me
acquired creams
1
and
second.
powders
I'm going
and
to throw
an
real
incredible
fast much
assortment
of a
mysterious
pretty much a
scented
frozen
things in
burrito
the
real
city,
quick.
and drilled her until she could have used them in her sleep. She had cheekbones now, and more color in her lips than nature had put there. A dark cream lining her eyelids and a fine powder that emphasized her lashes made her eyes seem larger. Not at all like herself. Some of the novices had told her admiringly how beautiful she was, and even a few Aes Sedai had called her a very pretty child. She hated it. The dress was quite pretty, she admitted, but she hated the rest of it. Yet there was no point in donning a disguise if she did not keep it up. I am sure you would remember, Gawain said dryly. I did not mean to interrupt you with your embroidery. Swallows, are they? Yellow swallows? Min thrust the hoop back into the basket. But I wanted to ask you to comment on this. He pushed a small leather-bound book, old and tattered, into her hands, and suddenly his voice was serious. Tell my brother this is nonsense. Perhaps he will listen to you. She examined the book. The Way of the Light by Lothair Mantelar. Opening it, she read at random. Therefore abjure all pleasure, for goodness is a pure abstract, a perfect crystalline ideal, which is obscured by base emotion. Pamper not the flesh. Flesh is weak, but spirit is strong. Flesh is useless where spirit is strong. Right thought is drowned in sensation, and right action hindered by passions. Take all joy from rightness, and rightness only. It seemed to be dry nonsense. Men smiled at Gawain and even managed a titter. So many words. I fear I know little of books, my Lord Gawain. I always mean to read one. I do, she sighed. But there is so little time. Why, just fixing my hair properly takes hours. Do you think it is pretty? The outraged startlement on his face nearly made her laugh, but she changed it to a giggle. It was a pleasure to turn the tables on him for a change. She would have to see if she could do it more often. There were possibilities in this disguise she had not considered. This stay in the tower had turned out to be all boredom and irritation. She deserved some amusement. Lothair Mantelar, Gawain said in a
Give me 1
tight
second.
voice.
That was not good.
The White Cloaks. The White Cloaks. He was a great man, Galad said
Yeah,
firmly.
definitely not good.
A philosopher of noble ideals. If the children of the light have sometimes been excessive since his day, it does not change that. Oh, my. White cloaks, Min said breathlessly, and added a little shudder. They are such rough men, I hear. I cannot imagine a white cloak dancing. Do you think there is any chance of a dance here? I said I do not seem to care for dancing either, and I do so love to dance. The frustration in Gawain's eyes was delightful. I do not think so, Galad said, taking the book from her. Aes Sedai are too busy with their own affairs. If I hear of a suitable dance in the city, I will escort you if you wish it. You need have no fear of being annoyed by those two louts. He smiled at her, unconscious of what he was doing, and she suddenly found herself breathless in truth. Men should not be allowed smiles like that. It actually took her a moment to remember what two louts he was talking about. The two men who had supposedly asked for Elmindrada's hand in marriage, nearly fighting each other because she could not make up her mind, pressing her to the point of seeking sanctuary in the tower because she could not stop encouraging them both. Just the entire excuse for her being there. It's this dress, she told herself. I could think straight if I had on my proper clothes. I've noticed the Amelie speaks to you every day, Gawain said suddenly. Has she mentioned our sister Elaine, or Egwene Alvir? Has she said anything of where they are? Min wished she could black his eye. He did not know why she was pretending to be someone else, of course, but he had agreed to help her be accepted as Elmindrada, and now he was linking her to women too many in the tower knew were friends of Min. Oh, the Honorman is such a wonderful woman, she said sweetly, baring her teeth in a smile. She always asks how I am passing the time and compliments my voice. I suppose she hopes I'll make a decision soon between Darvan and Domal, but I just cannot. She widened her eyes, hoping it made her look helpless and confused. They're both so sweet. Who did you say? Your sister, my Lord Gawain? The daughter heir herself? I do not think I've ever heard the Amelin seat mention her. What was the other name? She could hear
Yeah, that
Gawain
burrito was not good at all.
We should not bother Mistress Elmindrada with that, Galad said. It is our problem, Gawain. It is up to us to find the lie and deal with it. She barely heard him, because suddenly she was staring at a big man with long dark hair curling around slumped shoulders, wandering aimlessly down one of the gravel paths through the trees, under the watchful eyes of an accepted. She had seen Logain before, a sad-faced, once hardy man, always with an accepted for companion. The woman was meant to keep him from killing himself as much as to prevent his escape. Despite his size, he truly did not seem up to anything of the latter sort, but she had never before seen a flaring halo around his head, radiant in gold and blue. It was only there for a moment, but that was enough. Logain had proclaimed himself the Dragon Reborn, had been captured and gentled. Whatever glory he might have had as a false dragon was far behind him now. All that remained for him was the despair of the gentled, like a man who had been robbed of sight and hearing and taste, wanting to die, waiting for the death that inevitably came to such men in a few years. He glanced at her, perhaps not seeing her. His eyes looked hopelessly inward. So why had he worn a halo that shouted of glory and power to come? This was something she had to tell the other men. Poor fellow, Gawain muttered. I cannot help pitying him. Like, it would be a mercy to let him end it. Why do they make him keep on living? He deserves no pity, Galad pronounced. Have you forgotten what he was, what he did? How many thousands died before he was taken? How many towns were burned? Let him live on as a warning to others. Gawain nodded, but reluctantly. Men followed him. Some of those towns were burned after they declared for him. I have to go, Min said, getting to her feet, and Galad was instantly all solicitude. Forgive us, Mistress Elmingerton. We did not mean to frighten you. Logain cannot harm you. I give you my assurance. Yes, please make me feel faint. Do excuse me. I really must get up. Gawain looked extremely skeptical, but he scooped up her basket before she could touch it. Let me see part of the way at least, he said, his voice oozing false concern. This basket must be too heavy for you, dizzy as you are. I'd not want you to swoon. She wanted to snatch the basket and hit him with it, but that was not how Elmingerda would react. Thank you, my Lord Gawain. You are so kind. So kind. No, no, my Lord Galad. Do not let me encumber both of you. Do sit down here and read your book. Do say you will. I just could not bear it otherwise. She even fluttered her eyelashes. Somehow she managed to ensconce Galad on the marble bench and get away, though with Gawain right beside her. Her skirts were an irritant. She wanted to pull them up to her knees and run, but Elmingerda would never run, and never expose so much of her legs, except when dancing. Laris had lectured her severely on that very point. One time running, and she would nearly destroy the image of Elmingerda completely. And Gawain... Give me that basket, you muscle-brained cretin, she snarled as soon as they were out of Galad's sight, and pulled it away from him before he could comply. What do you mean by asking me about Elaine and Egwene in front of him? Elmingerda never met them. Elmingerda does not care about them. Elmingerda does not want to be mentioned in the same sentence with them. Can't you understand that? No, he said. Not since you won't explain. But I am sorry. There was hardly enough repentance in his voice to suit her. It is just that I am worried. Where are they? This news coming upriver about a false dragon in Tyr makes me no easier in my mind. They're out there, somewhere. The light knows where, and I keep asking myself, what if they are in the middle of the sort of bonfire Logain made out of Gildal? What if he isn't a false dragon? She asked, cautiously. You mean because the stories in the streets say he's taken the Stone of Tyr? Rumor has a way of magnifying events. I will believe that when I see it. And in any case, it will take more to convince me. Even the stone could fall. Right. I don't really believe Elaine and Egwene are in Tyr, but the not knowing eats at my belly like acid. If she is hurt... Min did not know which she he meant, and suspected he did not either. In spite of his teasing, her heart went out to him, but there was nothing she could do. If you could only do as I say, and I know. Trust the uncle. Trust. He exhaled a long breath. Do you know Galad has been drinking in the taverns with white cloaks? Anyone can cross the bridges and become thieves, even children of the bloody light. Galad? She said incredulously. In taverns? Drinking? No more than a cup or two, I'm sure. He would not unbend more than that, not for his own name day. Gawain frowned as if unsure whether that might be a criticism of Galad. The point is that he is talking with white cloaks, and now this book, according to the inscription, Eamon Valda himself gave it to him. In the hope you will find the way. Valda, name. The man commanding the white cloaks on the other side of the bridges, not knowing he's eating Galad up too, listening to white cloaks. If anything happens to our sister, or to Egwene, he shook his head. Do you know where they are, men? Would you tell me if you did? Why are you hiding? Because I drove 2 men mad with my beauty and cannot make up my mind, she told him acidly. He gave a bitter half-laugh, then masked it with a grin. Well, that at least I can believe. He chuckled and stroked under her chin with a finger. You are a very pretty girl, Elvin. A pretty, clever little girl. She doubled a fist and tried to punch him in the eye, but he danced back, and she stumbled over her skirts and nearly fell. Bloody ox of a thimble-brained man, she growled. Such grace of movement, Almindrida, he laughed. Such a dulcet, nightingale, a queen of what man would not grow starry-eyed at the sight of Almindrida? The mirth slid away, and he said, if you learn anything, please tell me. Please, I will beg on my knees. I will tell you, she said, if I can. If it's safe for them. I hate this place. Why can't I just go back to Rand? She left Gawain there and problem by herself, keeping an eye out for Aes Sedai or Accepted, who might question why she was above the ground floor and where she was going. The news of Logain was too important to wait until the Amelin encountered her, seemingly by accident, sometime in the late afternoon as usual. At least, that was what she told herself. Impatience threatened to pop out through her skin. She only saw a few Aes Sedai turning a corner ahead of her or entering a room in the distance, which was all to the good. No one simply dropped in on the Amelin scene. A handful of servants she passed, all bustling about their work, did not question her, of course, or even look at her twice, but quick curtsies, almost without pausing. Pushing open the door to the Amerlin's study, she had a simpering tale ready in case anyone was with Lyanna, but the antechamber was empty. She hurried to the inner door and put her head in. The Amerlin and the keeper were seated on either side of Swan's table, which was littered with small strips of thin paper. Their heads swiveled toward her sharply, a stare like 4 nails. What are you doing here? The Amerlin snapped. You are supposed to be a silly girl claiming sanctuary, not a friend of my childhood. There is to be no contact between us except the most casual. If necessary, I'll name Laris to watch over you like a nurse over a child. She would enjoy that, I think, but I doubt you would. Min shivered at the thought. Suddenly, Logain did not seem so urgent. It was hardly likely he would see glory in the next few days. She was not really why she had come, though. Only an excuse. She come back now. Closing the door behind her, she stammered out what she had seen and what it meant. She still felt uncomfortable doing so in front of Lyanna. Swan shook her head wearily. Another thing to worry about. Starvation in Kyrian, a sister missing in Tarabon, Trolloc raids increasing in the borderlands, and this fool who calls himself the prophet stirring up riots in He's apparently preaching that the dragon has been reborn as a Shinaran lord, she said incredulously. Even the small things are bad. The war in Arad Doman has stopped trade from Saldaea, and the Finch is making unrest in Zenobia may even be forced off the throne by it. The only good news I have heard is that the Blight has retreated for some reason. 2 miles or more of green beyond the border stones, without a hint of corruption or pestilence. From Saldaea to Shire, the first time in memory it has happened. But I suppose good news has to be balanced by bad. When a boat has one leak, it is sure to have others. I only wish it was a balance. Lyanna, have the watch on Logain increased. I can't see what trouble he could cause now, but I do not want to find out. She turned those piercing blue eyes on Min. Why did you come flapping your wings just like a startled gull? The going could have waited. The man is hardly likely to find power and glory before sunset. The near echo of her own thoughts made Min shift uncomfortably. I know, she said. Liana's eyebrows rose warningly, and she added a hasty, "Mother." The keeper nodded approvingly. That does not tell me why, child, Swan said. Min steeled herself. Mother, nothing I've yet seen the first day has been very important. I have not seen anything that points to the lies. That name still gave her a chill. I've told you everything I know about whatever disaster you Aes Sedai are going to face, and the rest of it is just useless. She had to stop and swallow with that penetrating gaze on her. Mother, there is no reason I should not go. There's reason I should. Perhaps Rand could make real use of what I can do. If he has taken the stone, Mother, he may need me. At least I need him. Burn me for a fool. The keeper shuddered openly at the mention of Rand's name. Swan, on the other hand, snorted loudly. Your viewings have been very useful. It's important to know about Logain. You found the groom who was stealing would land on everyone else. And the fair-haired novice who was going to be a child. The girl won't even think of her until she's finished her training. But we'd not have known until it was too late without you. No, you cannot go. Sooner or later, your viewings will draw me a chart to the Black Adja, and until they do, they still more than pay their passage. Min sighed, and not only because the Amelin meant to hold on to her. The last time she had seen that red-headed novice, the girl had been sneaking off to a wooded part of the grounds with a matron. They would be married, maybe before the end of summer. Min had known that as soon as she saw them together, though the tower never let a novice leave until the tower was ready, even one who could not go any further in her training. There was a farm in that pair's future, and a swarm of children, but it was pointless to tell the Amelin that. Could you at least let Gawain and Galad know that Egwene and their sister are all right, Mother? Asking irked her, and her tone of voice did too. A child denied a slice of cake, begging for a cookie instead. At least tell them something besides that ridiculous tale about doing penance on a farm. I have told you that is none of your concern. Do not make me tell you again. They don't believe it any more than I do, Min got out, before the Amelin's dry smile quieted her. It was not an amused smile. So you suggest I change where they are supposed to be, after letting everyone think them on a farm? Do you suppose that might raise a few eyebrows? Everyone but those boys accepts it, and you. Well, Kulin Gaiden will just have to work them that much harder. Sore muscles and enough sweat will take most men's minds off other troubles. Women's minds, too. You ask any more questions, and I'll see what a few days scrubbing pots will do for you. Better to lose your services for 2 or 3 days than have you poking your nose where it does not belong. You don't even know if they are in trouble, do you? Or Moiraine. It was not Moiraine she meant. Girl, Liana said warningly, but Min was not to be stopped now. Why haven't we heard? Rumors reached here 2 days ago. 2 days. Why doesn't one of those slips on your desk contain a message from her? Doesn't she have pigeons? I thought you Aes Sedai had people with messenger pigeons everywhere. If there isn't one in Tyr, there should be. A man on horseback could have reached Tar Valon before now. Why? The flat crack of Swan's palm on the table cut her off. You obey remarkably well, she said wryly. Child, until we hear something to the contrary, assume the young man is well. Pray that he... Liana shivered again. There's a saying in the Mauler, child, the Amelin went on. Do not
time for the
trouble till trouble troubles
other
you.
one.
Market culture. There was a timid knock at the door. The Amelin and the keeper exchanged glances, then 2 sets of eyes shifted to Min. Her presence was a problem. There was certainly nowhere to hide, Even the balcony was clearly visible from the room in its entirety. A reason for you to be here, Swan muttered. That doesn't make you any more than the fool girl you're supposed to be. Liana stand ready at the door. She and the keeper were on their feet together, Swan coming around the table while Liana moved to the door. Take Liana's seat, girl. Move your feet. Child, move your feet. Don't look sulky. Not angry, sulky. Stick your lower lip out. I may make you wear ribbons in your hair. Huge red bows. Liana. The Amerlin put her fists on her hips and raised her voice. And if you ever walk in on me unannounced again, child, I will. Liana pulled the door open to reveal a dark novice who flinched at Swan's continuing tirade, then dropped a deep curtsy. Messages for the Amerlin, Isabel, the girl squeaked. 2 pigeons arrived at the post. She was one of those who had told men she was beautiful, and she tried to stare past the keeper with wide eyes. This does not concern you, child, Liana said briskly, taking the tiny cylinders of bone out of the girl's hand. Back to the loft with you. Before the novice finished rising, Liana shut the door, then leaned against it with a sigh. I have jumped every unexpected sign since you told me. Straightening, she came back to the table. 2 more messages, mother. Shall I? Yes. Open them, the Amerlin said. No doubt Morgaze has decided to invade Kyrian after all, or Trollocs have overrun the borderlands. It would be of a piece with everything else. Men kept her seat. Swan had sounded all too realistic with some of those threats. Liana examined the red wax seal on the end of one of the small cylinders, larger than her own finger joint, then broke it open with a thumbnail when she was satisfied that the rolled paper inside she extracted with a slim ivory pick. Maybe as bad as Trump, she said almost as soon as she began reading. Every time has escaped. Light, Swan barked. How? This only says he
Let's do one more, then we'll start round 1.
2 sisters are dead. They might illumine their souls. But we've little time to mourn the dead of time are alive and ungentle. Here, Leona. Denquir, mother. A village east of the Black Hills on the Marathon Road, but the names of the Anteo and the Luan. It had to be some of his followers. Fools. Why won't they know when they are beaten? Choose out a dozen reliable sisters, Liana. The Amerlin grimaced. Reliable, she muttered. If I knew who was more reliable than a silver pike, I'd not have the problems I do. Do the best you can, Liana. A dozen sisters. And 500 of the guards. No, a full 1,000. Mother, the keeper said worriedly, the White Cloaks would not try to cross the bridges if I left them unwatched entirely. They would be afraid of a trap. There is no telling what is going on up there, Liana. I want whoever I send to be ready for anything. And Liana, Mazrim Time is to be gentled as soon as he is taken again. Liana's eyes opened wide with shock. The law? I know the law as well as you, but I will not risk having him freed again ungentled. I'll not risk another Guer Amalasin, not on top of everything else. Yes, mother, Liana said faintly. The Amerlin picked up the second cylinder and snapped it in 2 with a sharp crack to get the message out. Good news at last, she breathed, a smile blooming on her face. Good news. The sling has been used. The shepherd holds the sword. Rand? Min asked, and Swan nodded. Of course. The stone has fallen. Randall Thor, the shepherd, has Calendar. Now I can move. Liana, I want the hall of the tower convened this afternoon. No, this morning. I don't understand, Min said. You knew the rumors were about Rand. Why are you calling the hall now? What can you do that you could not before? Swan laughed like a child. What I can do now is tell them how I've received word from an unseen eye that the stone of Tyr has fallen and Calendor. Prophecy fulfilled. Enough of it for my purpose, at least. The dragon is reborn. They'll flinch. They'll argue. Nothing can oppose my pronouncement that the time is on. At least I can involve myself with him openly. Openly for the most part. Are we doing the right thing, Mother? Liana said abruptly. I know if he has Kalendor, he must be the dragon reborn. But he can channel, Mother. A man who can channel. I only saw him once, but even then there was something strange about him. Something more than being Tavir. Mother, is he so very different from time when it comes down to it? The difference is that he is the dragon reborn, the Amalin said quietly. Time's a wolf, and Randall Thor is the one you will use to defeat the shadow. Keep his name to yourself, Liana. Best not to reveal too much too soon. As you say, Mother, the keeper said, but she still sounded uneasy. Off with you now. I want the hall assembled in an hour. Swan thoughtfully watched the taller one. There may be more resistance than I would wish, she said when the door clicked shut. Min looked at her sharply. You don't mean, oh, nothing serious, child. Not as long as they don't know how long I have been involved with the Althor boy. She looked at the slip of paper again, then dropped it onto the table. I could wish Moraine had told me more. Why didn't she say more? And why have we not heard from her before this? More questions with you. That one you must ask Moraine. She's always gone her own way. Ask Moraine, child. Sarah Coventry worked the hoe in a desultory fashion, frowning at the tiny sprouts of threadleaf and hen's foot poking up in the rows of cabbages and beets. It was not that Mistress Elward was a harsh taskmistress. She was no more stern than Sarah's mother, and certainly easier than Shiriam. But Sarah had not gone to the White Tower to end up back on a farm hoeing vegetables with the sun barely up. Her white novice dresses were packed away. She wore brown wool her mother might have sewn, the skirt tied up to her knees to keep it out of the dirt. It was all so unfair. She had not done anything. Wriggling her bare toes in the turned soil, she glared at a stubborn hen's foot and channeled, meaning to burn it out of the ground. Sparks flashed around the leafy sprout, and it wilted. Hurriedly she sliced the thing out of the dirt and mind. If there was any fairness in the world, Lord Galad would come to the farm while out hunting. Leaning on the hoe, she lost herself in a daydream of healing Galad's injuries received in a fall from his horse. Not his fault, of course. He was a wonderful horseman, and him lifting her up in front of him on his saddle, declaring he would be her warder. She would be Green Anja, of course, and Sarah Coventry. Sarah jumped at the sharp voice, but it was not Mistress Elwood. She curtsied as best she could with her skirts gathered up. The day's greeting, Aes Sedai. Have you come to take me back to the tower? The Aes Sedai moved closer, not caring that her skirts dragged through the dirt of the vegetable patch. Despite the summer warmth of the morning, she wore a cloak, pulled up to shadow her face. Just before you left the tower, you took a woman to the Amalin seat. A woman calling herself Elminrida. Yes, Aes Sedai? Sarah said, a slight question in her voice. She did not like the way the Aes Sedai had said that, as if she had left the tower for good. Tell me everything that you heard or saw, girl, from the moment you took the woman in charge. Everything. But I heard nothing, Aes Sedai. The keeper sent me away as soon as pain racked her, digging her toes into the dirt, arching her back. The spasm lasted only moments, but it seemed eternal. Struggling for breath, she realized her cheek was pressed to the ground, and her still trembling fingers dug into the soil. She did not remember falling. She could see Mistress Elward's laundry basket lying on its side near the stone farmhouse, damp linens spilled out in a heap. Dazed, she thought that that was odd. Moira Elward would never leave her washing lying like that. Everything, girl, the Aes Sedai said coldly. She was standing over Sarah now, making no move to help her. She had hurt her. It was not supposed to be that way. Every person this Elminrida spoke to, every word she said, every nuance and expression. She spoke to Lord Gawain, Aes Sedai, Sarah sobbed into the earth. That is all I know, Aes Sedai. All. She began to weep in earnest. Sure, that was not enough to satisfy this woman. She was right. She did not stop screaming for a long time, and when the Aes Sedai left, there was not a sound around the farmhouse except for the chickens, not even breathing.
Chapter 18. Into the Ways. Buttoning up his coat, Baron paused, looking at the axe still secured in the wall as he had left it since drawing it out of the door. He did not like the idea of carrying the weapon again, but he untied the belt from the peg and buckled it around his waist anyway. The hammer he tied to his already stuffed saddlebags. Draping saddlebags and blanket roll over his shoulder, he gathered a filled quiver and his unstrung longbow from the corner. The rising sun poured heat and light through the narrow windows. The rumpled bed was the only proof that anyone had stayed here. Already the room had lost the feel of him. It even seemed to smell empty, despite his own scent of the sheets. He never stayed anywhere long enough to make that feel cling past his readiness to leave. Never long enough to put down roots, make it any kind of home. Well, I'm going home now. Turning his back on the already unoccupied room, he went out. Gaul rose easily from where he had been squatting against the wall beneath a tapestry of men on horseback hunting lions. He bore all of his weapons, with 2 leather water bottles, and a rolled blanket and a small cookpot were strapped beside the worked leather boat case on his back. He was alone. The others? Baron asked, and Gaul shook his head. Too long away from the threefold land. I warned you of that, Baron. These lands of yours are too wet. The air is like breathing water. There are too many people too close together. They have seen more than they want of strange places. I understand, Baron said. Though what he understood was that there would be no rescue after all. No company of Aiel to drive the White Cloaks out of the true rivers. He kept his disappointment inside. It was sharp after thinking he had escaped his fate. But he could not say he had not prepared himself for the alternative. No point in crying when the iron splint. You just reforged it. Did you have any trouble doing what I asked? None. I told one tyrant to take each thing you want to the Dragonwall Gate stable, and to tell no one of it. They will have seen one another there, but they will think the things are for me, and they will keep silent. The Dragonwall Gate. You would think the spine of the world was just over the horizon instead of 100 leagues or more off. The Aiel hesitated. The girl, the Ogier, make no secret of their preparations, Baron. She has been trying to find the Gleeman, telling everyone she means to travel the ways. Scratching his beard, Baron breathed heavily, close to a growl. If she gives me away to Moraine, I vow she'll not sit down for a week. She is very handy with those knives, Gaul said in a neutral tone. Not handy enough. Not if she's given me away. Baron hesitated. No company of Aiel. The gallows still waited. Gaul, if anything happens to me, if I give you the word, take Aiel away. She might not want to go, but take her anyway. See her safely out of the two rivers. Will you promise me that? I will do what I can, Baron. For the blood debt I owe you, I will. Gaul sounded doubtful, but Baron did not think Aiel's knives would be enough to stop him. They took back passages as much as possible, and narrow stairs meant to carry servants unobtrusively. Baron thought it too bad the tyrants had not given servants their own corridors as well. Still, they saw few people, even in the broad hallways with their gilded lampstands and ornate hangings, and no nobles at all. He commented on the absence, and Gaul said, Grand Althor has called them to the heart of the stone. Baron only grunted, but he hoped Moraine had been among those summoned. He wondered whether this was Rand's way of helping him escape her. Whatever the reason, he was glad enough to take advantage of it. They stepped out of the last cramped stairway onto the ground floor of the stone, where cavernous hallways as wide as roads led to all the outer gates. There were no wall hangings here. Black iron lamps in iron brackets high in the walls lit the windowless passages, and the floor was paved with broad, rough stones able to stand long wear from horses' shod hooves. Perrin picked his pace up to a trot. The stables lay just inside ahead down the great tunnel, the wide dragon wall gate itself standing open beyond, and only a handful of defenders for guard. Moraine could not intercept them now, not without the Dark One's own luck. The stable's open doorway was an arch 15 paces across. Perrin took one step inside and stopped. The air was heavy with the smell of straw and hay, underlaid with grain and oats, leather, and horse manure. Stalls filled with fine Tyrant horses, prized everywhere, lined the walls, with more in rows across the wide floor. Dozens of grooms were at work, currying and combing, mucking out, mending tack. Without pausing, one or another sometimes glanced at where Fail and Loyal stood, booted and ready for travel. And beside them, Bane and Chiad, accoutered like Gaul with weapons and blankets, water bottles and cooking pot. "Are they why you only said you would try?" Perrin asked quietly. Gaul shrugged. "I will do what I can, but they will take her side. Chiad, let's go shoot. Her clan makes a difference. Her clan and mine have a blood feud in it, and I am no spear sister to her. But perhaps the water oaths will hold her. I will not dance spears with her unless she offers." Perrin shook his head. Strange people. What were water oaths? What he said, though, was, "Why are they with her?" "Bane says they wish to see more of your lands, but I think it is the argument between you and Fail which fascinates them. They like her. When they heard of this journey, they decided to go with her instead of you. Well, as long as they keep her out of trouble." He was surprised when Gaul threw back his head and laughed. It made him scratch his beard worriedly. Loyal came toward them, long eyebrows sagging anxiously. His coat pockets bulged, as was usual when he was traveling, mainly with the angular shapes of books. At least his limp seemed better.
Fail is becoming impatient, Evan. I think she might insist on leaving any minute. Please hurry. You could not even find the way gate without me. Not that you should try, certainly. You humans make me leap about so I can only find my own head. Please hurry.
"I will not leave him," Fail called. "Not even if he is yet too stubborn and foolish to ask a simple favor. Should that be the case, he may still follow me like a lost puppy. I promise to scratch his ears and take care of him." The Aiel women doubled over laughing. Gaul leaped straight up suddenly, kicking higher, 2 paces or more above the floor, while twirling one of his spears. "We will follow like stalking ridge cats," he shouted, "like hunting wolves." He landed easily, lightly. Loyal stared at him in amazement. Bane, on the other hand, lazily combed her short, fiery hair with her fingers. "I have a fine wolf skin with my bedding in the hole," she told Chiad in a poor voice. "Wolves are so easily taken." A growl rose in Perrin's throat, pulling both women's eyes to him. For a moment, Bane looked on the point of saying something more, but she frowned at his yellow stare and held her peace. Not afraid, but suddenly wary. "This puppy is not well housebroken yet," Fail confided to the Aiel women. Perrin Instead, he went to the stall that held his dun stallion, as tall as any of the Tyrant animals, but heavier in shoulder and haunch. Waving away a groom, he bridled Stepper and led him out himself. The grooms had walked the horse, of course, but he had been confined enough to frisk in the quick steps that made Perrin give him his name. Perrin soothed him with the sure confidence of a man who had shoed many horses. It was no trouble at all putting his high-cantled saddle on, lashing his saddlebags and blanket roll behind. Gaul watched with no expression. He would not ride a horse unless he had to, and then not a step farther than absolutely necessary. None of the Aiel would. Perrin did not understand why. Pride, perhaps, in their ability to run for long distances. The Aiel made it seem more than that, but he suspected none of them could explain. The pack horse had to be ready too, of course, but that was quickly done, since everything Gaul had ordered was waiting in a neat pile. Food and water skins, oats and grain for the horses. None of that would be available in the ways. A few other things, like hobbles, some horse medicines just in case, spare tinderbox, and such. Most of the space in her hampers went for leather bottles like those the Aiel used for water, only larger and filled with lamp oil. Once the lanterns on long poles were strapped atop the rest, it was done. Thrusting his unstrung bow under the saddle girth, he swung up into Stepper's saddle, with the pack animal's lead in hand. And then had to wait, seething. Loyal was already mounted on a huge, hairy, fetlocked horse, taller than any other in the stable by hands, yet reduced nearly to pony size by the Ogier's long legs hanging down. There had been a time when the Ogier was almost as unwilling a rider as the Aiel, but he was at home on a horse now. It was Aiel who took her time, examining her mount almost as if she had never seen the glossy black mare before, though Perrin knew she had put the horse through her paces before buying, soon after they came to the stone. The horse, Swallow by name, was a fine animal of tyrant breeding, with slender ankles and an arched neck, a prancer with a look of speed and endurance both, though shod too lightly for Perrin's taste. Those shoes would not last. It was all another effort to put him in his place, whatever she thought that was. When Fail finally mounted, in her narrow divided skirts, she reined closer to Perrin. She rode well, woman and horse moving as one. "Why can you not ask, Perrin?" she said softly. "You tried to keep me away from where I belong, so now you have to ask. And such a simple thing be so difficult." The stone rang like a monstrous bell, the stable floor leaping, the ceiling quivering on the point of coming down. Stepper leaped too, screaming, head flailing. It was all Perrin could do to keep his seat. Grooms scrambled off the floor where they had fallen, and ran desperately to quiet horses rearing, shrieking, attempting to climb out of their stalls. Loyal clung to the neck of his huge mount, but Fail sat Swallow surely as the mare danced and squealed wildly. Ran. Perrin knew it was him. The pull of Taviran dragged at him, two whirlpools in a stream drawing one another. Coughing in the falling dust, he shook his head as hard as he could, straining not to dismount and run back up into the stone. "We ride," he shouted, while tremors still shook the fortress. "We ride now, Loyal, now!" Fail seemed to see no more point to delay. She heeled her mare out of the stable beside Loyal's taller horse. Their two pack animals pulled along, all galloping before they reached the Dragon Wall gate. The defenders took one look and scattered, some still on hands and knees. It was their duty to keep people out of the stone, and they had no orders to keep these in. Not that they would necessarily have been able to think straight enough to do so, even if they had had orders. Not with the tremors just subsiding and the stone still groaning above them. Perrin was right behind with his own pack horse, wishing the Ogier's animal could run faster, wishing he could leave Loyal's lumbering mount behind and outrun the suction trying to draw him back. That pull of Taviran to Taviran. They galloped together through the streets of Tyr, toward the rising sun, barely slowing to avoid carts and carriages. Men in tight coats and women with layered aprons, still shaken by the upheaval, stared at them dazed, sometimes barely leaping out of the way. At the walls of the inner city, paving stones gave way to dirt, shoes and coats to bare feet and bare chests, above baggy breeches held up by broad sashes. The folk here dodged no less assiduously, though. Perrin would not let Stepper slow until they had galloped past the city's outer wall, past the simple stone houses and shops that clustered outside the city proper, into a countryside of scattered farms and thickets, and beyond the pull of Taviran. Only then, breathing almost as hard as his lathered horse, he reined Stepper to a walk. Loyal's ears were stiff with shock. Fail licked her lips and stared from the Ogier to Perrin, white-faced. "What happened? Was that him?" "I don't know," Perrin lied. "I have to go, Rand. You know that. You looked me in the face when I told you and said I had to do what I thought I must." "Where are Bane and Chiad?" Fail said. "It will take them an hour to catch up now. I wish they would ride. I offered to buy them horses and they looked offended. But we need to walk the horses anyway after that, to let them cool down." Perrin held back from telling her she did not know as much of the Aiel as she thought she did. He could see the city walls behind them and the stone rearing above like a mountain. He could even make out the sinuous shape on the banner waving over the fortress and the displaced birds swirling about. Neither of the others could have. It was no difficulty at all to see three people running toward them in long ground-eating strides, their flowing ease belying the pace. He did not think he could have run that fast, not for long, but the Aiel had to have maintained their speed to be this close behind. "We'll not have to wait that long," he said. Aiel frowned back toward the city. "Is that them? Are you certain?" Abruptly, the frown shifted to him for a moment, daring him to answer. Asking him had been too much like admitting he was part of her party, of course. "He is very boastful of his eyesight," she told Loyal, "but his memory is not very good. At times I think he would forget to light a candle at night if I did not remind him. I expect he's seen some poor family running from what they think is an earthquake, don't you?" Loyal shifted uncomfortably in his saddle, sighing heavily, and muttered something about humans that Perrin doubted was complimentary. Fail did not notice, of course. Not too many minutes later, Fail stared at Perrin as the three Aiel drew close enough for her to make out. But she said nothing. In this mood, she was not about to admit he had been right about anything. Not if he said the sky was blue. The Aiel were not even breathing hard when they slowed to a halt beside the horses. "It is too bad it was not a longer run." Bane shared a smile with Jihad and gave Gaul a sly look. "Else we could have run this stone dog into the ground," Jihad said, as if finishing the other woman's sentence. "That is why stone dogs take their vows not to retreat. Stone bones and stone heads make them too heavy to run." Gaul took no offense, though Perrin noticed he stood where he could keep an eye on Jihad. "Do you know why maidens are so often used as scouts, Perrin? Because they can run so far. And that comes from being afraid some man might want to marry them. A maiden will run 100 miles to avoid that." "Very wise of them," Aiel said tartly. "Do you need to rest?" she asked the Aiel women, and looked surprised when they denied it. She turned to Loyal anyway. "Are you ready to go on? Good. Find me this waygate, Loyal. We have stayed here too long. If you let a stray puppy stay close to you, it begins to think you will take care of it, and that will never do."
Fail,
Loyal protested.
are you not carrying this too far?
"I will carry it as far as I must, Loyal. The waygate?"
Ears sagging, Loyal puffed out a heavy breath and turned his horse eastward again. Perrin let him and Fail get a dozen paces ahead before he and Gaul followed. He must play by her rules, but he would play them at least as well as she. The farms, cramped little places with rough stone houses Perrin would not have used to shelter animals, grew more scattered the farther east they rode, and the thickets smaller, until there were neither farms nor thickets, only a rolling, hilly grassland. Grass as far as the eye could see, unbroken except for patches of brush here and there on a hill. Horses dotted the green slopes too, in clumps of a dozen or herds of 100. The famed Tyrant stock. Large or small, each gathering of horses was under the eyes of a shoeless boy or two, mounted bareback. The boys carried long-handled whips that they used to keep the horses together, or turn them, cracking the whips expertly to turn a stray without ever coming close to the animal's hide. They kept their charges clear of the strangers, moving them back if necessary, but they watched the passage of this odd company, 2 humans and an ogier mounted, plus 3 of the fierce Aiel that story said had taken the stone, with the bold curiosity of the young. It was all a pleasing sight to Perrin. He liked horses. Part of the reason he had asked to be apprenticed to Master Luhan had been the chance to work with horses. Not that there were so many as this in Emmons Field, nor so fine. Not so loyal. The ogier began muttering to himself, louder the farther they rode across the grassy hills, until at last he burst out in a deep bass rumble.
Gone. All gone, and for what? Grass. Once this was an ogier grove. We did no great works here, not to compare with Manetheren or the city you call Caven. but enough that a grove was planted. Trees
Day wasn't too bad on fire. Can't complain none.
Great trees towering 100 spans into the sky, all tended devotedly to remind my people of the steading they had left to build things for men. Men think it is the stonework we prize, but that is a trifling thing, learned during the long exile after the breaking. It is the trees we love. Men thought Manethra and my people's greatest triumph.
Hell yeah.
We knew it to be
always good to have munchies.
Gone now, like this. Gone, and it will not come again.
Loyal stared at the hills, bare save for grass and horses, with a hard face, his ears drawn back tight to his head. He smelled of fury. Peaceful, most stories told Ogier, almost as specific as the traveling people. But some, a few, named them implacable enemies. Bern had only seen Loyal angry once before. Perhaps he had been angry last night defending those children. Looking at Loyal's face,
I'll be right back.
To anger the Ogier and pull the mountains down on your head. Everyone took its meaning as to try to do something that was impossible. Bern thought maybe the meaning had changed with the years. Maybe in the beginning it had been anger the Ogier and you pull the mountains down on your head. Difficult to do, but deadly if accomplished. He did not think he would ever want Loyal, gentle fumbling Loyal with his broad nose always in a book, to become angry with him. It was Loyal who took the lead once they reached the site of the vanished Ogier Grove, bending their path a little southward. There were no landmarks, but he was sure of his direction, sure with every pace of the horses. Ogier could feel a waygate, sense it somehow, find it as certainly as a bee could find the hive. When Loyal finally dismounted, the grass was little more than knee-high on him. There was only a thick clump of brush to be seen, taller than most, leafy shrubs as tall as the Ogier. He ripped it all away, almost regretfully, stacking it to one side.
Perhaps the boys with the horses can use it for firewood when it dries.
And there was the waygate. Rearing against the side of the hill, it appeared more a length of gray wall than a gate. And the wall of a palace at that, thickly carved in leaves and vines, so finely done that they seemed almost as alive as the bushes had been. 3,000 years at least it had stood there, but not a trace of weather had marred its surface. Those leaves could have rippled with the next breeze. For a moment they all stared at it silently, until Loyal took a deep breath and put his hand on the one leaf that was different from any other on the waygate. The trefoil leaf Babin de Sora, the fabled tree of life. Until the moment his huge hand touched it, it seemed as much a part of the carving as all the rest. But it came away easily. Aiel gasped loudly, and even the Aiel murmured. The air was full of the smell of unease. There was no saying who it came from. All of them, perhaps. The stone leaves did seem to stir from an unfelt breeze now. They took a tinge of green, of life. Slowly a split appeared down the middle, and the halves of the waygate opened out, revealing not the hill behind, but a dull shimmering that faintly reflected their images.
Once, it is said,
Loyal murmured,
the waygates shone like mirrors, and those who walked the ways walked through the sun and the sky. Gone now, like this grove.
Hastily pulling one of the filled pole lanterns from his pack horse, Baron got it alight. It is too hot out here, he said. A little shade would be good. He booted stepper toward the waygate. He thought he heard Vail gasp again. The dun stallion balked, approaching his own dim reflection, but Baron heeled him onward. Slowly, he remembered. It should be done slowly. The horse's nose touched its image hesitantly, then merged in as though walking into a mirror. Baron moved closer to himself, touched. Icy cold slid along his skin, enveloping him hair by hair. Time stretched out. The cold vanished like a pricked bubble, and he was in the midst of endless blackness, the light of his pole lantern a crushed pool around him. Stepper and the pack horse whickered nervously. Gaul stepped through calmly and began preparing another lantern. Behind him was what seemed like a sheet of smoked glass. The others were visible out there, Loyal getting back on his horse, Fail gathering her reins, all of them creeping, barely moving. Time was different inside the waves. Fail is upset with you, Gaul said, once he had his lantern alight. It did not have much illumination. The darkness drank in light, swallowed it. She seems to think you have broken some sort of agreement. Bane and Chiat, do not let them get you alone. They mean to teach you a lesson, for Fail's sake. And you will not sit on that animal so easily if they manage what they plan. I agree to nothing, Gaul. I do what she has forced me to do through trickery. We will have to follow Loyal as she wants soon enough, but I mean to take the lead for as long as I can. He pointed to a thick white line under Stepper's hooves, broken and heavily pitted. It led off ahead, vanishing in the blackness only a few feet away. That leads to the first guidepost. We will need to wait there for Loyal to read it and decide which bridge to take. But Vail can follow us that far. Bridge, Gaul murmured thoughtfully. I know that word. There is water in here? No, it isn't exactly that kind of bridge. They look the same, sort of, but maybe Loyal can explain it. The Aielman scratched his head. Do you know what you are doing, Perrin? No, Perrin admitted. But there's no reason for Fail to know that. Gaul laughed. It is fun to be so young, is it not, Perrin? Frowning, uncertain whether the man was laughing at him, Perrin heeled Stepper on, drawing the pack horse behind. The lantern light would not be visible at all in the air, 20 or 30 paces from its edge. He wanted to be completely out of sight before Fail came through. Let her think he had decided to go on without her. If she worried for a few minutes, until she found him at the guidepost, it was the least she deserved.
Chapter 19. The Wave Dancer. With the golden sun barely over the horizon, the shiny black lacquered carriage rocked to a halt at the foot of the wharf behind a team of four matched grays, and the lanky dark-haired driver in his black and gold striped coat leaped down to open the door. No sigil adorned the door panel, of course. Tyrant nobles gave aid to Aes Sedai only under duress, no matter how effusive the smiles, and none wanted their names or houses linked to the tower. Elaine got down gratefully without waiting for Nynaeve, straightening her blue linen summer traveling cloak. The streets of the Mala were rutted by carts and wagons, and the carriage's leather springs had not been very good. A breeze slanting across the Aranon actually seemed cool after the heat of the stone. She had intended to show no effects of the rough ride, but once upright she could not help knuckling the small of her bag. At least last night's rain still holds the dust down, she thought. She suspected that they had been given a carriage without curtains on purpose. North and south of her, more docks like wide stone fingers stretched into the river. The air smelled of tar and rope, fish and spices and olive oil, of nameless things rotting in the stagnant water between the piers, and peculiar long yellow-green fruits in huge bunches heaped in front of the stone warehouse behind her. Despite the early hour, men wearing leather vests on shirtless shoulders scurried about, toting large bundles on bent backs, or pushing handcarts piled with barrels or crates. None spared her more than a passing sullen glance, dark eyes falling quickly, forelock touched grudgingly. Most did not raise their heads at all. She was sad to see it. These Tyran nobles had handled their people badly. Mishandled them was more like it. In Andor she could have expected cheerful smiles and a respectful word of greeting, freely given by straight-backed men who knew their worth as well as hers. It was almost enough to make her regret leaving. She had been raised to lead and one day govern a proud people, and she felt the urge to teach these folk dignity. But that was Rand's job, not hers. And if he doesn't do it properly, I will give him a piece of my mind. A bigger piece. At least he had begun by following her advice, and she had to admit he knew how to treat his people. It would be interesting to see what he had done by the time she returned, if there's a point to coming back. A dozen ships were clearly visible from where she stood, and more beyond, but one, moored across the end of the dock she faced, sharp bow upriver, filled her eyes. The Seafolk raker was easily 100 paces long, half again as large as the next vessel in sight, with 3 great towering masts amidships, and one shorter on the raised deck at the stern. She had been on ships before, but never one so big, and never on one going to sea. Just the name of the ship's owners spoke of distant lands and strange ports. The Athanmier, the Sea Folk. Stories meant to be exotic always contained the Sea Folk, unless they were about the Aiel. Nynaeve climbed out of the carriage behind her, tying a green traveling cloak at her neck, and grumbling to herself and to the driver. Tumble about like a hen in a windstorm. Thump like a dusty rug. How did you manage to find every last rut and hole between here and the stone, Goodman? That took true skill. A pity none of it goes into handling horses. He tried to hand her down, his narrow face sullen, but she refused his aid. Sighing, Elaine doubled the number of silver pennies she was taking from her purse.
I'll be right back.
Getting us safely and swiftly. She smiled as she pressed the coins into his hand. We told you to go fast, and you did as we asked. The streets are not your fault, and you did an excellent job under poor conditions. Without looking at the coins, the fellow gave her a deep bow, a grateful look, and a murmured, "Thank you, milady," as much for the words as the money, she was sure. She had found that a kind word and a little praise were usually received as well as silver was, if not better, though the silver itself was seldom unappreciated, to be sure. "The lights send you a safe journey, my lady," he added. The merest flicker of his eyes toward Nynaeve said that wish was for Elaine alone. Nynaeve had to learn how to make allowances and give consideration. Truly she did. When the driver had handed their bundles and belongings out of the carriage, turned his team, and started away, Nynaeve said grudgingly, "I shouldn't have snapped at the man, I suppose. A bird could not make an easy way over those streets. Not in a carriage, at any rate. But after bouncing about all the way here, I feel as if I'd been on horseback a week." "It isn't his fault you have a sore back," Elaine said, with a smile to take away any sting as she took up her things. Nynaeve barked a wry laugh. "I said that, didn't I? You will not expect me to go running after him to apologize, I hope. That handful of silver you gave him should soothe any wounds short of mortal. You really must learn to be more careful with money, Elaine. We do not have the realm of Andor's resources for our own use. A family could live comfortably for a month on what you hand out to everyone who does the work they've been paid to do for you." Elaine gave her a quietly indignant look. Nynaeve always seemed to think they should live worse than servants, unless there was reason not to, instead of the other way around, as made sense. But the older woman did not appear to notice the expression that always put royal guardsmen on their toes. Instead, Nynaeve hoisted her bundles and sturdy cloth bags and turned down the dock. "At least this ship will be a smoother ride than that. I do hope smooth. Shall we go aboard?" As they picked their way down the pier between working men and stacked barrels and carts full of goods, Elaine said, "Nynaeve, the sea folk can be touchy until they know you, or so I was told. Do you think you might try to be a little what?" "Tactful, Nynaeve." Elaine skipped a step as someone spat on the dock in front of her. There was no telling which fellow had done it. When she looked around, they all had their heads down and were hard at work. Mishandling by the High Lords or no, she would have said a few quietly sharp words that the culprit would not have soon forgotten if she could have found him. "You might try to be a little tactful for once." Of course, Nynaeve started up the raker's rope-railed gangway. "As long as they do not bounce me about." Elaine's first thought on reaching the deck was that the raker appeared very narrow for its length. She did not know a great deal about ships, in truth, but to her it seemed a huge splinter. "Oh, light, this thing will toss worse than the carriage, however big it is." Her second was for the crew. She had heard stories about the Ata'an Mier, but had never seen one before. Even the stories told little, really. a secretive people who kept to themselves, almost as mysterious as the Aiel. Only the lands beyond the waste could possibly be more strange, and all anyone knew of them was that the sea folk brought ivory and silk from there. These Asa-an-Mier were dark, barefoot, and bare-chested men, all cleanly shaven, with straight black hair and tattooed hands, moving with the sureness of those who knew their tasks well enough to do them with half a mind, but were putting their whole minds to it. There was a rolling grace to their movements, as though, with the ship still, they yet felt the motions of the sea. Most wore gold or silver chains about their necks, and rings in their ears, sometimes 2 or 3 in each, and some with polished stones. There were women among the crew, too, as many as the men, hauling ropes and coiling lines right with the men, with the same tattooed hands, in the same baggy breeches of some dark oiled cloth, held by colorful narrow sashes and hanging open at the ankle. But the women wore loose, colorful blouses, too, all brilliant reds and blues and greens, and they had at least as many chains and earrings as the men, including, Elaine noticed with a small shock, 2 or 3 women with rings in one side of their noses. The grace of the women outshone even that of the men, and put Elaine in mind of some stories she had heard as a child, by listening where she was not supposed to. Women of the Afa-an-Mier were in those tales the epitome of alluring beauty and temptation, pursued by all men. The women on this ship were no more beautiful than any others, really, but watching them move, she could believe those tales. 2 of the women on the raised deck at the stern were obviously not ordinary crew. They were barefoot, too, and their garb was of the same cut, but one was clothed entirely in brocaded blue silks, the other in green. The older of the pair, the one in green, wore 4 small gold rings in each ear and one in the left side of her nose, all worked so they sparkled in the morning sunlight. A fine chain ran from her tiny nose ring to one earring, supporting a row of tiny dangling gold medallions, and one of the chains around her neck held a pierced golden box, like ornate gold lace, that she lifted to sniff from time to time. The other woman, the taller, had only 6 earrings in total and fewer medallions. The pierced box she sniffed at was just as finely wrought gold, though. Exotic indeed. Elaine winced just thinking about the nose rings and that chain. Something odd about the stern deck itself caught her eye, but at first she could not tell what. Then she saw. There was no tiller for the rudder. Some sort of spoked wheel stood behind the women, lashed down so it could not turn, but no tiller. How do they steer? The smallest riverboat she had seen had had a tiller. There had been tillers on all the other ships lining the nearby docks. More and more mysterious, these sea folk. Remember what Moraine told you, she cautioned as they approached the stern deck. That had not been much. Even Aes Sedai knew little about the Afa-an-Mier. Moraine had imparted the proper phrasings, though, the things that had to be said for good manners. And remember tact, she added in a firm whisper. I will remember, Nynaeve replied sharply. I feel grateful. Elaine truly hoped she would. The 2 sea folk women waited for them at the top of the stairs. Ladder, Elaine remembered, even when they were stairs. She did not understand why ships had to have different names for common things. A floor was a floor, in a barn or an inn or a palace. Why not on a ship? A cloud of perfume surrounded the 2, a slightly musky scent, wafting from the lacy gold boxes. The tattoos on their hands were stars and seabirds surrounded by the curls and whirls of stylized waves. Nynaeve inclined her head. I am Nynaeve Almira, Aes Sedai of the Green Adja. I seek the sail mistress of this vessel and passage, if it pleases the light. This is my companion and friend, Elaine Trakand, also Aes Sedai of the Green Adja. The light illumine you and your vessel and send the winds to speed you. That was almost exactly the way Moraine had instructed them to speak. Not about Aes Sedai of the Green Adja. Moraine had seemed resigned to that more than anything else, and amused at their choice of Adja. But the rest. The older woman, with gray touches in her black hair and fine wrinkles at the corners of her large brown eyes, inclined her head just as formally. Nevertheless, she seemed to be taking them in from head to foot, especially the great serpent ring each wore on her right hand. I am Coeen Din
Just do
Jubai
a couple of
Wildwings,
key
sail
light
mistress
fight,
and
and
wave dancer.
we'll start
This
round
is
2.
Jorin Din Jubai Whitewing, my sister of the blood and wind finder of wave dancer. There may be passage available, if it pleases the light. The light illumine you and see you safe to your journey's end. It was a surprise that the two were sisters. Elaine could see the resemblance, but Jorin looked much younger. She wished the Windfinder were the one they had to deal with. Both women had the same reserve, but something about the Windfinder reminded her of Avienda. It was absurd, of course. These women were no taller than she herself. Their coloring could not have been more different from the Aiel woman's, and the only weapon either had in sight was the stout knife tucked in her sash, looking very workmanlike, despite carvings and gold wire inlays on the handle. But Elaine could not help feeling some similarity between Joran and Avienda anyway. Let us talk then, sail mistress, if it pleases you, Nynaeve said, following Moraine's formula. Sailings and ports and the gift of passage. The sea folk did not charge for passage, according to Moraine. It was a gift, which just coincidentally would be exchanged for a gift of equal value. Colleen glanced away, then astern toward the stone and the white banner rippling over it. We will talk in my cabin, Aes Sedai, if it pleases you. She motioned toward an open hatch behind that strange wheel. The welcome of my ship to you and the grace of the light be upon you until you leave his decks. Another narrow ladder staircase led down into a neat room, larger and taller than Elaine had expected from her experiences on smaller vessels, with windows across the stern and gimbaled lamps on the walls. Almost everything seemed to have been built into the room except for a few lacquered chests of various sizes. The bed was large and low, right under the stern windows, and a narrow table surrounded by armchairs stood across the middle of the room. There was very little clutter. Rolled charts lay on the table, a few ivory carvings of strange animals stood on railed shelves, and half a dozen bare-bladed swords of different shapes, some that Elaine had never seen before, rested on hooks on the walls. An oddly worked square brass gong hung from a beam over the bed, while right before the stern windows, as if in a place of honor, a helmet sat on a featureless wooden head carved for the purpose. A helmet like the head of some monstrous insect, lacquered in red and green, with a narrow white plume to either side, one broken. The helmet Elaine recognized. Shanchan, she gasped before thinking. Nynaeve gave her a vexed look, and deservedly. They had agreed it would make more sense and ring more true if Nynaeve, as the older, took the lead and did most of the talking. Coeen and Jorin exchanged unreadable glances. You know of them? The sail mistress said. Of course, one must expect Aes Sedai to know these things. This far east we hear a score of stories, the truest less than half true. Elaine knew she should leave it at that, but curiosity tickled her tongue. How did you come by the helmet, if I may ask? Wave Dancer encountered a Shanchan ship last year, Coeen replied. They wished to take him, but I did not wish to give him up. She shrugged slightly. I have the helmet to remind me, and the sea took the Shanshan, the light be merciful to all who sail. I will not go close to a vessel with ribbed sails again. You were lucky, Nynaeve said curtly. The Shanshan hold captive women who can channel, and make them channel as a weapon. If they had had one on that ship, you would be regretting ever having seen it. Elaine grimaced at her, though it was too late. She could not tell whether the sea folk women were offended by Nynaeve's tone. The pair kept the same neutral expressions, but Elaine was beginning to realize they did not show very much on their faces, not to strangers anyway. Let us speak of passage, Coeen said. If it pleases the light, we may call where you wish to go. All things are possible in the light. Let us sit. The chairs around the table did not slide back. They and the table were fastened to the floor, deck. Instead, the arms swung out like gates and latched in place once you had sat. The arrangement seemed to bear out Elaine's dire predictions of heaving and pitching. She did very well with it herself, of course, but too much rolling on a riverboat set Nynaeve's stomach jumping. It must be worse on the ocean than on the river, however fierce the wind, and the worse Nynaeve's stomach, the worse her temper. Nynaeve sicking up and in a bad collar at the same time. There were few things more dreadful in Elaine's experience. She and Nynaeve were placed together on one side of the table with the sailmistress and the windfinder at the ends. At first it seemed strange, until she realized they would both look at whichever of the two was talking, allowing the other to watch them unobserved. Do they always deal with passengers this way? Or is it because their eyes sty? Well, because they think they are. It was a caution that everything might not be as simple as they hoped with these people. She hoped Nynaeve was taking notice. Elaine had not seen any order passed, but a slender young woman with only one ring in each ear appeared, bearing a tray with a square white brass-handled teapot and large handleless cups. Not of sea-folk porcelain, as might have been expected, but thick pottery. Less likely to be broken in heavy weather, she decided bleakly. It was the young woman who took her attention, though, and nearly brought a gasp. She was bare to the waist, just like the men above. Elaine hid her shock very well, she thought, but Nynaeve sniffed loudly. The sailmistress waited until the girl had poured tea brewed to blackness, then said, "Have we sailed, Dorel, when I did not see? Is there no land in sight?" The slender woman blushed furiously. "There is land, sailmistress." It was a miserable whisper. Coeen nodded. "Until there is no land in sight, and has been none for one full day, you will work at cleaning the bilges when garments are a hindrance. You may leave." "Yes, sailmistress," the girl said, even more woefully. She turned away, undoing her red sash dejectedly as she went through the door at the far end of the room. "Share this tea, if it please you," the sailmistress said, "that we may talk in peace." She sipped at her own and continued while Elaine and Nynaeve were tasting theirs. "I ask that you forgive any offense, Aes Sedai. This is Dorel's first voyage, except between the islands. The young often forget the ways of the shorebound. I will punish her further if you are affronted." "There is no need," Elaine said hastily, taking the excuse to set her cup down. The tea was even stronger than it looked, very hot, unsweetened, and quite bitter. "Truly, we were not offended. There are different ways among different peoples." The light scent, not too many more as different as that. Light! What if they don't wear any clothes at all once they get out to sea? Light! Only a fool takes offense at customs different from her own. Nynaeve gave her a level look, bland enough for the Aes Sedai they were pretending to be, and took a deep swallow from her cup. All she said was, "Please think no more of it." It was not possible to tell if she meant it for Elaine or the sea folk woman. "Then we will speak of passage, if it pleases you," Coeen said. "To what port do you wish to sail?" "Tanchico," Nynaeve said, a bit more briskly than she should have. "I know you may not mean to sail there, but we need to go quickly as only a raker can, and without stopping if that is possible. I offer this small gift for the inconvenience." She took a paper from her belt pouch and unfolded it, pushing it down the table to the sailmistress. Moiraine had given that to them, and another like it, letters of rights. Each allowed the bearer to draw up to 3,000 gold crowns from bankers and moneylenders in various cities, though it was not likely any of those men and women knew it was White Tower money they held. Elaine had goggled at the amount. Nynaeve had gaped openly. But Moiraine said it might be needed to make the sailmistress forsake her intended ports of call. Coeen touched the letter of rights with one finger, read, "A vast sum for the gift of passage," she murmured, "even counting that you ask me to alter my sailing plans. I am more surprised now than before. You know that we very seldom carry Aes Sedai on our ships. Very seldom. Of all who ask passage, only Aes Sedai may be refused. and almost always are, as from the first day of the first sailing. Aes Sedai know this, and so almost never ask. She was looking into her teacup, not at them, but Elaine glanced the other way and caught the windfinder studying their hands lying on the table. No, their rings. Moiraine had not said anything about this. She had pointed out the Raker as the swiftest ship available and encouraged them to make use of it. Then again, she had given them these letters of rights, very likely sufficient to buy a fleet of ships like this one. Well, several ships at the least. Because she knew it would take that much to bribe them to carry us? But why had she kept secrets? A foolish question. Moiraine always kept secrets. But why waste their time? Do you mean to refuse us passage? Nynaeve had abandoned tact for bluntness. If you do not carry Aes Sedai, why did you bring us down here? Why not tell us up above and be done with it? The sailmistress unlatched one arm of her chair, rose, and went to peer out of the stern windows at the stone. Her earrings and the medallions across her left cheek glittered in the light of the rising sun. He can wield the one power, so I have heard, and he holds the sword that cannot be touched. The Aiel have come over the dragon wall to his call. I have seen several in the streets, and it is said they fill the stone. The stone of Tyr has fallen, and war breaks over the nations of the land. Those who once ruled have returned and been driven back for the first time. Prophecies being fulfilled. Nynaeve looked as confounded as Elaine felt at this change of subject. The prophecies of the dragon, Elaine said after a moment. Yes, they are being fulfilled. He is the dragon reborn, sailmistress. He's a stubborn man who hides his feelings so deeply I cannot find them. That is what he is. Coeen turned. Not the prophecies of the dragon, I said. The Jedi prophecy. The prophecy of the Cormor. Not the one you wait for and dread. The one we seek, herald of a new age. At the breaking of the world, our ancestors fled to the safety of the sea while the land heaved and broke as storm waves do. It is said they knew nothing of the ships they took to flee, but the light was with them, and they survived. They did not see the land again until it was still once more, and by then much had changed. All, everything, the world drifted on the water and the wind. It was in the years after that the Jedi prophecy was first spoken. We must wander the waters until the Cormor returns and serve him at his coming. We are bound to the sea. Salt water courses in our veins. Most of us set no foot on the land except to await another ship, another sailing. Strong men weep when they must serve ashore. Women ashore go onto a ship to bear their children, into a rowboat if no more is at hand, for we must be born on the water, as we must die on it, and be given to it in death. The prophecy is being fulfilled. He is the Cormor. Aes Sedai serve him. You are proof of that you are here in this city. That is in the prophecy as well. The White Tower shall be broken by his name, and Aes Sedai shall kneel to wash his feet and dry them with their hair. You will have a long wait if you expect to see me wash any man's feet, Nynaeve said wryly. What does this have to do with our passage? Will you take us or not? Elaine cringed, but the sailmistress came back just as directly. Why do you wish to journey to Tanchico? It is an unpleasant port of call now. I docked there last winter. Shore folk nearly swarmed my vessel seeking passage out to anywhere. They did not care, so long as it was away from Tanchico. I cannot believe conditions are any better now. Do you always question your passengers so? Nynaeve said. I've offered you enough to buy a village. 2 villages. If you want more, name your price. Not a price, Elaine hissed in her ear. A gift. If Coeen was offended, or even had heard, she gave no sign. Why? Nynaeve took a tight grip on her braid, but Elaine laid a hand on her arm. They had planned to keep a few secrets themselves, but surely they had learned enough since sitting down to alter any plan. There was a time for secrecy
I'm
and a
draw back
time
about
for
drinking
truth.
water.
We hunt the Black Ajah, sailmistress. We believe some of them are in Tanchico. She met Nynaeve's angry stare calmly. We must find them, else they may harm. The dragon reborn. The cardinal. The light seemed safe to darken. The windfinder breathed. It was the first time she had spoken, and Elaine stared at her in surprise. Jorin was frowning and not looking at anyone, but she spoke to the sailmistress. We can take them, my sister. We must. Corinne nodded. Elaine exchanged looks with Nynaeve and saw her own questions mirrored in the other woman's eyes. Why wasn't the windfinder who decided? Why not the sailmistress? She was the captain, whatever her title. At least they were going to get passage after all. For how much? Elaine wondered. How large a gift? She wished Nynaeve had not revealed that they had more than was in that one letter of rice. She accused me of tossing gold about. The door opened and a heavy-shouldered, gray-haired man in loose green silk breeches and sash came in, ruffling through a sheaf of papers. 4 gold rings decorated each ear, and 3 heavy gold chains hung at his neck, including one with a perfume box. A long puckered scar down his cheek and 2 curved knives tucked in his sash gave him something of a dangerous air. He was fastening a peculiar wire framework over his ears to hold clear lenses in front of his eyes. The sea folk made the best looking glasses and burning lenses and the like, of course, somewhere on their islands, but Elaine had never seen anything like this device. He peered through the lenses at the papers and began talking without looking up. Coe, this fool is willing to trade me 500 snow fox pelts from Candor for those 3 small barrels of Two Rivers tabak I got in Ebu Dar. 500? He can have them here by midday. His eyes rose and he gave a start. Forgive me, my wife. I did not know you had guests. The light be with you.
Oh, that's all kinds of shit.
By midday, my husband, Coeen said, I will be falling downriver. By nightfall, I will be at sea. He stiffened. Am I still cargo master, wife? Or has my place been taken while I did not see? You are cargo master, husband, but the trading must stop now and preparations begin for getting underway. We sail for Tanchico. Tanchico? The papers crumpled in his fist, and he brought himself under control with an effort. Wife, no, sail mistress, you told me our next port was Mayenne, and then eastward to Shara. I have traded with that in mind. Shara, sail mistress, not Tarabon. What I have in my holds will bring little in Tanchico, perhaps nothing. May I ask why my trade is to be ruined and Wave Dancer impoverished? Coeen hesitated, but when she spoke, her voice was still formal. I am sail mistress, my husband. Wave Dancer sails when and where I say. It must be enough for now. As you say, sail mistress, he rasped. So it is. He touched his heart. Elaine thought Coeen flinched, and padded out with his back stiff as one of the ship's masts. I must make this up to him, Coeen murmured softly, staring at the door. Of course, it is pleasant making up with him, usually. He saluted me like a deck boy, sister. We regret being a cause of trouble, sail mistress, Elaine said carefully. And we regret having witnessed this. If we have caused any embarrassment to anyone, please accept our apologies. Embarrassment? Coeen sounded startled. I am sail mistress. I doubt your presence embarrassed Toram, and I would not apologize to him for that if it did. Trade is his, but I am sail mistress. I must make up to him, and it will not be easy since I must keep the reason secret still, because he is right, and I could not think quickly enough to give him a reason beyond what I would give a raw hand. That scar on his face he earned clearing the Shanchan from Wave Dancer's decks. He has older scars earned defending my ship, and I have only to put out my hand to have gold placed in it because of his trading. It is the things I cannot tell him I must make up to him, because he deserves to know. I do not understand, Nynaeve said. We would ask you to keep the Black Aja secret. She shot a hard look at Elaine, one that promised hard words once they were alone. Elaine intended a few words of her own about the meaning of tact. But surely 3,000 crowns is reason enough to take us to Tanchico. I must keep you secret, Aes Sedai, what you are and why you travel. Many among my crew consider Aes Sedai bad luck. If they knew they not only carried Aes Sedai, but toward a port where other Aes Sedai may serve the Father of Storms, the grace of the light shone on us that none was close enough to hear me call you so above. Will it offend if I ask you to keep below as much as possible, and not to wear your rings when on deck? For answer, Nynaeve plucked her great serpent ring off and dropped it into her pouch. Elaine did the same, a bit more reluctantly. She rather enjoyed having people see her ring. Not quite trusting Nynaeve's remaining store of diplomacy at this point, she spoke up before the other woman could. Sail Mistress, we have offered you a gift of passage if it pleases you. If it does not, may I ask what would? Coeen came back to the table to look at the letter of rights again, then pushed it back to Nynaeve. I do this for the coroner. I will see you safe ashore where you wish, if it pleases the light. It shall be done. She touched the fingers of her right hand to her lips. It is agreed, under the light. Jorin made a strangled sound. My sister, has a cargo master ever mutinied against his sail mistress? Coeen gave her a flat-eyed stare. I will put in the gift of passage from my own chest, and if Toram ever hears of it, my sister, I will put you in the bilges with Dorel. For ballast, perhaps. That the two seafolk women had dropped formality was confirmed when the Windfinder laughed aloud. And then your next port would be in Chachin, my sister, or Camelin, for you could not find the water without me. The sail mistress addressed Elaine and Nynaeve regretfully. Properly, Aes Sedai, since you served the Coromor, I should honor you as I would sail mistress and Windfinder of another ship. We should bathe together and drink honeyed wine and tell each other stories to make ourselves laugh like we. But I must make ready to sail, and Wave Dancer rose like his name, leaping, pounding against the dock. Elaine whipped back and forth in her chair, wondering as it continued whether this was really better than being thrown to the deck. Then, finally, it was over, the leap slowing, growing smaller. Coeen scrambled to her feet and raced for the ladder, Jorin at her heels, already shouting orders to look for damage to the hull. Chapter 20. Winds Rising. Elaine struggled to open the latch on an arm of her chair and darted after them, almost colliding with Nynaeve at the ladder. The ship still rocked, if not as violently as before. Uncertain whether they were sinking, she pushed Nynaeve ahead of her, prodding her to climb faster. On the deck, the crew dashed about, checking the rigging or peering over the side to inspect the hull, shouting about earthquakes. The same shouts were rising from the dockmen, too, but Elaine knew better, despite the tumble of things on the piers and the ships yet pitching at their moorings. She stared toward the stone. The huge fortress was still, except for masses of startled birds swirling about, and that pale banner waving almost lazily in an isolated breeze. No sign that anything had ever touched the mountainous mass. That had been Rand, though. She was sure of it. She turned to find Nynaeve looking at her, and for a long moment their eyes met. A fine pickling if he's damaged the ship, Elaine said finally. How are we supposed to get to Tanchico if he goes tossing all the ships about? Right. He has to be all right. I can do nothing if he isn't. He is all right. He is. Nynaeve touched her arm reassuringly. No doubt that second letter of yours touched a nerve. Men always overreact when they let their emotions go. It's the price for holding them in the way they do. He may be the dragon reborn, but he must learn, man to woman, that what are they doing here? They were two men standing amid the bustling seafolk on the deck. One was Tom Marilyn in his gleeman's cloak, with leather-cased harp and flute on his back and a bundle lying at his feet beside a battered wooden box with a lock. The other was a lean, handsome tyrant in his middle years, a hard, dark man, wearing a flat, conical straw hat and one of those commoner's coats that fit snugly to the waist, then flared like a short skirt. A notched sword breaker hung at a belt worn over his coat, and he leaned on a pale staff of knobbly jointed wood exactly his own height, and no thicker than his thumb. A square-tied parcel dangled by a loop from his shoulder. Elaine knew him. His name was Julian Sandor. It was obvious the two men were strangers despite standing almost side by side. They held themselves with stiff reticence. Their attentions were directed the same way, though, split between following the sail mistress's progress toward the stern deck and peering at Elaine and Nynaeve, plainly uncertain and masking it behind a brisk show of confidence. Tom grinned and stroked his long white mustaches and nodded every time he looked up at the two of them. Sandar made solemn, self-assured bows. "He is not damaged," Coeen said, climbing the ladder. "I can sail within the hour if it pleases you. Well within, if a Tyrian pilot can be found. I will sail without him, if not, though it means never returning to Tyr." She followed their gaze to the two men. "They ask passage, the gleeman to Tanchico, and the thief-catcher to wherever you travel. I cannot refuse them, and yet—" Her dark eyes came back to Elaine and Nynaeve. "I will do so if you ask it." Reluctance to break custom battled in her voice with desire to help them, to serve the coroner. "The thief-catcher is a good man, even considering that he is shore-bound. No offense to you, under the night. The gleeman I do not know, yet a gleeman can enliven a voyage and lighten tired hours." "You know Master Sandar," Nynaeve said. "Twice he has found those who pilfered from us, and found them quickly. Another shoreman would have taken longer, so he might ask more for the work. It is obvious that you know him as well. Do you wish me to refuse passage?" Her reluctance was still there. "Let us see why they are here first," Nynaeve said in a flat voice that did not bode well for either man. "Perhaps I should do the talking," Elaine suggested, gently but firmly. "That way you can watch to see if they are hiding anything." She did not say that way Nynaeve's temper would not get the better of her, but the wry smile the other woman gave her said she had heard it anyway. "Very well, Elaine, I will watch them. Perhaps you might study how I keep calm. You know how you are when you become overwhelmed." Elaine had to laugh. The two men straightened as she and Nynaeve approached. Around them the crew bustled, swarming into the rigging, hauling ropes, lashing some things down and unlashing others, to orders relayed from the sail mistress. They moved around the four shore people with barely a glance. Elaine frowned at Tom Merriman thoughtfully. She was sure she had never seen the gleeman before his appearance in the stone, yet even then she had been struck by something familiar about him. Not that that was likely. Gleemen were village performers in the main. Her mother had certainly never had one at the palace in Cambridge. The only gleemen Elaine could remember seeing had been in the villages near her mother's country estates, and this white-haired hawk of a man had surely never been there. She decided to speak to the thief-catcher first. He insisted on that, she remembered. What was a thief-taker elsewhere was a thief-catcher in Tyr, and the distinction seemed important to him. "Master Sandar," she said gravely, "you may not remember us. I am Elaine Trakan, and this is my friend Nynaeve Almira. I understand that you wish to travel to the same destination as we. Might I ask why? The last time we saw you, you had not served us very well." The man did not blink at the suggestion he might not remember. His eyes flickered across their hands, noting the absence of rings. Those dark eyes noted everything, and recorded it indelibly. "I do remember, Mistress Tricond, and well. But if you will forgive me, the last time I served you was in the company of Nat Coffin, when we pulled you both out of the water before the silver pipe could get you." Nynaeve harumphed, but not loudly. It had been the cell, not the water, and the black Aja, not Silverclunk. Nynaeve in particular did not like being reminded that they had needed help that time. Of course, they would not have been in that cell without Julian Sandar. No, that was not entirely fair. True, but not completely fair. That is all very well, Elaine said briskly, but you still haven't said why you want to go to Tanchico. He drew a deep breath and eyed Nynaeve warily. Elaine was not sure that she liked him being more critical of the other woman than of her. I was rousted out of my house no more than he said carefully, by a man you know, I think. A tall, stone-faced man calling himself Lan. Nynaeve's eyebrows rose slightly. He came on behalf of another man you know. Shepherd, I was told. I was given a great quantity of gold and told to accompany you. Both of you. I was told that if you do not return safely from this journey, shall we just say it would be better to drown myself than to come back? Lan was emphatic, and the shepherd no less so in his message. The sail mistress tells me I cannot have passage unless you agree. I am not without certain skills that can be useful. The staff whirled in his hands, a whistling blur, and was still. His fingers touched the sword breaker on his hip like a short sword, but unsharpened, its slots meant to catch a blade. Men will find ways to get round what you tell them to do, Nynaeve murmured, sounding not unpleased. Elaine only frowned vexedly. Rand had sent him. He must not have read the second letter before he did. Burn him. Why does he leap about so? No time to send another letter, and it would probably only confuse him more if I did, and make me look a bigger fool. Burn him. And you, Master Marilyn, Nynaeve said. Did the shepherd send a gleeman after us too? Or the other man? To keep us amused with your juggling and fire-eating, perhaps? Tom had been scrutinizing Sandal closely, but he shifted his attention smoothly and made an elegant bow, only spoiling it with a too elaborate flourish of that patch-covered cloak. Not the shepherd, Mr. Salmuir. A lady of our mutual acquaintance asked me to accompany you. The lady who found you and the shepherd in Emmons Field. Why? Nynaeve said suspiciously. I do have useful skills, Tom told her with a glance at the thief-catcher. Other than juggling, that is. And I have been to Tanchico several times. I know the city well. I can tell you where to find a good inn, and what districts are dangerous in daylight as well as after dark, and who must be bribed so the civil watch does not take too close an interest in your doings. They are keen on watching outlanders. I can help you with a good many things. That familiarity tickled at Elaine's mind again. Before she realized what she was doing, she reached up and tugged at one of his long white mustaches. He gave a start, and she clapped both hands to her mouth, flushing crimson. Forgive me. I seemed to remember doing that before. I mean, I am sorry. Why did I do that? He must think me an imbecile. I would remember, he said, very stiffly. She hoped he was not affronted. It was hard to tell from his expression. Men could be offended when they should be amused, and amused when they should be offended. If they were going to be traveling together, that was the first time she realized that she had decided they could come. Naive, she said. The other woman understood the unspoken question, of course. She studied the two men thoroughly, then nodded. They may come. As long as they agree to do as they are told, I'll not have some low-brained man going his own way and endangering us. As you command, Mr. Salmuir, Sandal said immediately, with a bow. But Tom said, a gleeman is a free soul, Nynaeve. But I can promise I will not endanger you. Far from it. As you are told, Nynaeve said pointedly. Your word on it, or you will watch this ship sail from the dock. The Atha on the air do not refuse passage to anyone, Nynaeve. Do you think not? Was the thief-taker, Sandal winced, the only one told he needed our permission? As you are told, Master Marilyn. Tom tossed his white head like a fractious horse and breathed heavily, but finally he nodded. My word on it. Mistress Almiera. Very well, then, Nynaeve said in a bracing voice. It is settled. You two find the sail mistress now, and tell her I said to find the pair of you a cubbyhole somewhere if she can, out of our way. Off with you now. Quickly. Sandor bowed again and left. Tom quivered visibly before joining him, stiff-backed. Are you not being too hard on them? Elaine said as soon as they were out of earshot. That was not far, with all the hurly-burly on deck. We do have to travel together after all. Smooth words make smooth companions. Best to begin as we mean to go on. Elaine, Tom Marilyn knows very well we are not full Aes Sedai. She lowered her voice and glanced around as she said it. None of the crew was even looking at them, except for the sail mistress, back near the stern deck where she was listening to the tall gleeman and the fleet catcher. Men talk, they always do, so Sandar will know it soon enough as well. They present no trouble to Aes Sedai, but too accepted. Given half a chance, they would both be doing things they thought for the best, no matter what we said. I do not mean to give them even that half chance. Perhaps you are right. Do you think they know why we are going to Tanchico? Nynaeve sniffed. No, or they'd not be so sanguine, I think, and I would rather not tell them until we must. She gave Elaine a meaningful look. There was no need for her to say she would not have told the sail mistress either, had it been left to her. Here's a saying for you. Borrow trouble and you repay tenfold. You speak as if you don't trust them, Nynaeve. She would have said the other woman was behaving like Moraine, but Nynaeve would not appreciate the comparison. Can we? Jewel and Sandar betrayed us once before. Yes, I know no man could have avoided it, but there it is just the same. And Leandrin and the others know his face. We will have to put him in different clothes. Perhaps make him let his hair grow longer. Perhaps a mustache, like that thing infesting the Gleeman's face. It might do. And Tom Marilyn? Elaine asked. I think we can trust him. I don't know why, but I do. He admitted being sent by Moraine, Nynaeve said wearily. What has he not admitted, though? What did she tell him that he hasn't told us? Is he meant to help us or something else? Moraine plays her own game so often I trust her this much more than I do Leandrin. She held her thumb and forefinger half an inch apart. She will use us, you and me both. Use us up if it helps Rand. Or rather, if it helps whatever she has planned for Rand. She would leash in for a lapdog if she could. Moraine knows what has to be done, Nynaeve. For once, she was reluctant to admit that. What Moraine knew had to be done might well speed Rand on his way toward Tarman Gaiden that much faster. On his way toward death, perhaps. Rand balanced against the world. It was silly, foolish, and childish that those scales should tremble so evenly for her. Yet she did not dare make them swing, even in her mind, because she was not sure which way she would send them. She knows it better than he does, she said, making her voice firm. Better than we. Perhaps, Nynaeve sighed, but I do not have to like it. Ropes were cast off at the bow where triangular sails suddenly broke out, and Wave Dancer heeled away from the dock. More sails appeared, great white squares and triangles. The stern lines were cast off, and the ship curled out into the river in a great arc through the anchored ships awaiting their turn at the docks, a smooth curve that ended heading south, downriver. The sea folk handled their ship as a master horseman would a fine steed. That peculiar spoked wheel worked the rudder somehow as one of the bare-chested crewmen turned it. A man, Elaine was relieved to see. Sail mistress and wind finder stood to one side of the wheel, Colleen issuing occasional orders, sometimes after a murmured consultation with her sister. Toram watched for a while, with a face that might have been carved from a deck plank, then stalked below. There was a Tyran on the stern deck, a plump, dejected-looking man in a dull yellow coat with puffy gray sleeves, rubbing his hands nervously. He had been hustled aboard just as the gangway was being hauled up, a pilot who was supposed to guide Wave Dancer downriver. According to Tyran law, no ship could pass through the fingers of the dragon without a Tyran pilot aboard. His dejection certainly came from doing nothing, for if he gave any directions, the sea folk paid them no heed. Muttering about seeing what their cabin was like, Nynaeve went downstairs, below, but Elaine was enjoying the breeze across the deck and the feel of starting out. To travel, to see places she had not seen before, was a joy in itself. She had never expected to, not like this. The daughter heir of Andor might make a few state visits, and she would make more once she succeeded to the throne, but they would be bounded about with ceremony and propriety, not like this at all. Barefoot sea folk, and a ship headed to sea. The riverbank slid by quite quickly as the sun climbed, an occasional cluster of huddled stone farmhouses and barns, bleak and lonely, appearing and vanishing behind. No villages, though. Tyr would not allow the smallest village on the river between the city and the sea, for even the tiniest might one day become competition for the capital. The High Lords controlled the size of villages and towns throughout the country, with a buildings tax that grew heavier the more buildings there were. Elaine was sure they would never have allowed Godon to thrive on the Bay of Ramara if not for the supposed necessity of a strong presence overlooking Mayenne. In a way, it was a relief to be leaving such foolish people behind. If only she did not have to leave one foolish man behind as well. The number of fishing boats, most small and all surrounded by clouds of hopeful gulls and fisher birds, increased the farther south Wave Dancer went, especially once the vessel entered the maze of waterways called the Fingers of the Dragon. Often the birds overhead and the long poles that held the nets were all that was visible besides plains of reeds and knife grass rippling in the breezes, dotted with low islands where odd twisted trees grew with spidery tangles of roots exposed to the air. Many boats worked right in the reeds, though not with nets. Once Elaine saw some of them close to clear water, men and women dropping hooked lines into the watery growth and pulling up wriggling dark-striped fish as long as a man's arm. The Tyran pilot began to pace anxiously once they were in the delta, with the sun overhead, turning up his nose at an offered bowl of thick, spicy fish stew and bread. Elaine ate hers hungrily, wiping her pottery bowl with the last scrap of bread, though she shared his unease. Passages broad and narrow ran in every direction. Some ended abruptly in plain sight against a wall of reeds. There was no way to tell which of the others might not vanish just as suddenly around the next bend. Corinne did not slow Wave Dancer regardless, or hesitate at choosing a way. Obviously she knew the channels to take, or the Windfinder did, but the pilot still muttered to himself as if he expected to run aground any moment. It was late afternoon when the river mouth suddenly appeared ahead, and the endless stretch of the Sea of Storms beyond. The sea folk did something with the sails, and the ship shuddered softly to a dead halt. It was only then that Elaine noticed a large rowboat skittering like a many-legged water-bug out from an island where a few forlorn stone buildings stood around the base of a tall, narrow tower, where men stood small at the top, beneath the banner of Tyr, 3 white crescents on a field of red and gold. The pilot took the purse Corinne proffered without a word and scrambled down a rope ladder to the boat. As soon as he was aboard, the sails were swung about again, and Wave Dancer breasted the first rollers of open sea, rising slightly, slicing through. Sea folk scampered through the rigging, setting more sails as the ship sped south and west, away from the land. When the last thin strip of land dropped below the horizon, the sea folk women doffed their blouses. All of them, even the sailmistress and the Windfinder. Elaine did not know where to look. All those women walking about half-dressed and completely unconcerned by the men all around them. Julian Sandar seemed to be having as hard a time as she was, alternating between staring at the women wide-eyed and staring at his feet, until he finally all but ran below. Elaine would not let herself be routed that way. She opted for staring over the side at the sea instead. Different customs, she reminded herself, as long as they don't expect me to do the same. The very thought nearly made her laugh hysterically. Somehow the black oddjow was easier to contemplate than that. Different customs. Light. The sky grew purple, with a dull golden sun on the horizon. Scores of dolphins escorted the vessel, rolling and arching alongside, and farther out some sort of sparkling silver-blue fish rose above the surface in schools, gliding on outstretched fins a span across for 50 paces or more, before plunging back into the swelling gray-green water. Elaine watched in amazement for a dozen flights before they did not appear again. But the dolphins, great sleek shapes, were wondrous enough, a guard of honor taking Wave Dancer back where he belonged. Those she recognized from descriptions in books. It was said if they found you drowning, they would push you to shore. She was not sure she believed it, but it was a pretty story. She followed them along the side of the ship to the bow, where they frolicked in the bow wave, rolling on their sides to look up at her without losing an inch. She was almost in the narrowest point of the bow before she realized Tom Merriman was there before her, smiling down at the dolphins a bit sadly, his cloak catching the wind like the cloud of sails above. He had rid himself of his belongings. He did seem familiar. Truly he did. Are you not happy, Master Merriman? He glanced at her sideways. Please, call me Tom, my lady. Tom, then, but not my lady. I am only Mistress Tricond here. As you say, Mistress Tricond, he said with a hint of a smile. How can you look at these dolphins and be unhappy, Tom? They are free, he murmured, in such a tone that she was not sure he was answering her. They have no decisions to make, no prices to pay. Not a worry in the world, except finding fish to eat, and sharks, I suppose, and lionfish, and likely 100 more things I don't know. Perhaps it is not such an enviable life at that. Do you envy them? He did not answer. That was the wrong question anyway. She needed to make him smile again. No, laugh. For some reason she was sure if she could make him laugh, she would remember where she had seen him before. She chose another topic, one that should be nearer his heart. Do you mean to compose the Epic of Rand, Tom? Epics were for bards, not gleemen, but there could be no harm in a little flattery. The Epic of the Dragon Reborn. Doyle needs to write a book, you know. Perhaps I will, Mr. Strachan. Perhaps. But neither my composing nor the Ogier's book will make much difference in the long run. Our stories will not survive in the long run. When the next age comes, he grimaced and tugged one of his mustaches. Come to think of it, that may be no more than a year or two off. How's the end of an age marked? It cannot always be a cataclysm on the order of the breaking. But then, if the prophecies are to be believed, this one will be. That is the trouble with prophecy. The original is always in the old tongue and maybe high chant as well. If you don't know what the thing means beforehand, there's no way to puzzle it out. Does it mean what it says, or is it a flowery way of saying something entirely different? You were talking of your epic, she said, trying to guide him back, but he shook his shaggy white head. I was talking of change. My epic, if I compose it, and Loyal's book, will be no more than seed, if we are both lucky. Those who know the truth will die, and their grandchildren's grandchildren will remember something different, and their grandchildren's grandchildren something else again. 24 generations, and you may be the hero of it, not Rand. Me? She laughed. Or maybe Matt, or Land, or even myself. He grinned at her, warming his weathered face. Tom Merriman. Not a glee man, but what? Who can say? Not eating fire, but breathing it, hurling it about like an Aes Sedai. He flourished his cloak. Tom Merriman, the mysterious hero, toppling mountains and raising up kings. The grin became a rich belly laugh. Rand al'Thor may be lucky if the next age remembers his name correctly. She was right. It was not just a feeling. That face, that mirth-filled laugh, she did remember them. But from where? She had to keep him talking. Does it always happen that way? I do not think anyone doubts say that Arthur Hawkwing conquered an empire, the whole world, or near enough. Hawkwing, young mistress, he made an empire all right. But do you think he did everything the books and stories and epics say he did? The way they say he did it? Killed the 100 best men of an opposing army one by one? The two armies just stood there while one of the generals, a king, fought 100 duels? The books say he did. There isn't time between sunrise and sunset for one man to fight 100 duels, girl. She almost stopped him short. Girl? She was daughter heir of Andor, not girl, but he had the bit in his teeth. And that is only 1,000 years back. Go back further, back to the oldest tales I know from the age before the age of legends. Did Mosk and Merc really fight with spears of fire, and were they even giants? Was Elspeth really queen of the whole world, and was Anla really her sister? Was Anla truly the wise counselor, or was it someone else? Well, ask what sort of animal ivory comes from, or what kind of plant grows silk, unless that comes from an animal too. I do not know about those other questions, Elaine said a bit stiffly, being called girl still rankled. But you could ask the sea folk about ivory and silk. He laughed again, as she had hoped, though it still did no more than drive home the certainty that she knew him. But instead of calling her foolish, as she half expected and was prepared for, he said, practical and to the point, just like your mother. Both feet on the earth and few flights of fancy. She lifted her chin a little, made her face cooler. She might be passing herself off as simple Mistress Trakand, but this was something else. He was an amiable old man, and she did want to reason out the puzzle of him, but he was a gleeman after all, and he should not speak of a queen in such familiar tones. Oddly, infuriatingly, he appeared amused. Amused! The Atha'an Mier do not know either, he said. They see no more of the lands beyond the Aiel Waste than a few miles around the handful of harbors where they are permitted to land. Those places are walled high, and the walls guarded so they cannot even climb up to see what is on the other side. If one of their ships makes landfall anywhere else, or any ship not theirs, only the sea folk are allowed to come there. That ship and its crew are never seen again. And that is almost as much as I can tell you after more years of asking than I like to think of. The Atha Mier keep their secrets, but I do not believe they know much to keep here. From what I have been able to learn, the Kyrianen were treated the same when they still had the right to travel the Silk Path across the waste. Kyrianen traders never saw anything but one walled town, and those who wandered from it vanished. Elaine found herself studying him much as she had the dolphins. What kind of man was this? Twice now he might have laughed at her. He had been amused just then, as much as she hated to admit it, but instead he talked to her as seriously as, well, as father to daughter. You might find a few answers on this ship, Tom. They were bound east until we convinced the sail mistress to take us to Tanchico. To Shara, the cargo master said, east of Mayen. That must mean beyond the waste. He stared at her for a moment. Shara, you say? I have never heard any such name before. Is Shara a city or nation or both? Perhaps I will learn a little more. What did I say? She wondered. I said something to make him think. Right. I told him I convinced Colleen to change her plans. It could not make any difference, but she scolded herself severely. A careless word to this nice old man might do no harm, but the same might kill her in Tanchico. And Nynaeve, too, not to mention the thief-catcher and Tom himself, if he was such a nice old man. Tom, why did you come with us? Just because Maureen asked? His shoulders shook. She realized he was laughing at himself. As to that, who can say? Aes Sedai asking favors are not easily resisted. Perhaps it was the prospect of your pleasant company for the voyage. Or perhaps I decided Rand is old enough to look after himself for a while. He laughed out loud, and she had to laugh with him. The idea of this white-haired old fellow looking after Rand, the feeling that she could trust him came back, stronger than ever, as he looked at her. Not because he could laugh at himself, or not only that. She could not have given a reason beyond the fact that, looking up into those blue eyes, she could not make herself believe this man would ever do anything to harm her. The urge to pull one of his mustaches again was almost overwhelming, but she schooled her hands to stillness. She was not a child, after all. A child. She opened her mouth, and suddenly everything went out of her head. "Please excuse me, Tom," she said hurriedly. "I must... excuse me." She started toward the stern quickly, not waiting for a reply. He probably thought the ship's motion had upset her stomach. Wave Dancer was pitching more rapidly, moving faster through the great sea swells as the wind freshened. Two men stood at the wheel on the stern deck, the muscle of both needed to hold the vessel on course. The sailmistress was not on deck, but the windfinder was, standing at the rail beyond the wheelmen, bare to the waist like the men, studying the sky where billowing clouds rolled more fiercely than the ocean. For once it was not Jorin's state of dress or undress that bothered Elaine. The glow of a woman embracing Saidar surrounded her, clearly visible despite the lurid light. That was what she had felt, what had drawn her, a woman channeling. Elaine stopped short of the stern deck to study what she was doing. The flows of air and water the windfinder handled were cable thick, yet her weaving was intricate, almost delicate, and it reached as far as the eye could see across the waters, a web drawn across the sky. The wind rose higher, higher, the wheelmen strained, and Wave Dancer flew through the sea. The weaving stopped, the glow of Saidar vanished, and Jorin slumped at the rail, leaning on her hands. Elaine climbed the ladder quietly, yet the sea folk woman spoke in a soft voice without turning her head as soon as she was near enough to hear. "In the middle as I worked, I thought that you were watching me. I could not stop then. There might have been a storm even Wave Dancer could not survive. The Sea of Storms is well named. It will throw up bad winds enough without my help. I meant not to do this at all, but Corrine said we must go quickly, for you and for the colonel." She raised her eyes to peer at the sky. "This wind will hold until morning if it pleases the light." "This is why the sea folk do not carry Aes Sedai," Elaine said, taking a place beside her at the rail. "So the tower won't learn windfinders can channel. That is why it was your decision to let us aboard, not your sister's. Jorin, the tower will not try to stop you. There is no law in the tower to stop any woman channeling, even if she is not Aes Sedai. The White Tower will interfere. It will try to reach onto our ships, where we are free of the land and landsmen. It will try to tie us to itself, binding us away from the sea." She sighed heavily. "The wave that has passed cannot be called back." Elaine wished she could tell her it was not so, but the tower did seek out women and girls who could learn to channel, both to bolster the numbers of Aes Sedai, dwindling now compared to what they once had been, and because of the danger of learning unguided. In truth, a woman who could be taught to touch the true source usually found herself in the tower whatever she wanted, at least until she was trained enough not to kill herself or others by accident. After a moment, Jorin went on. "It is not all of us. Only some. We send a few girls to Tar Valon, so Aes Sedai will not come looking among us. No ship will carry Aes Sedai whose windfinder can weave the winds. When you first named yourself, I thought you must know me, but you did not speak. You asked passage, and I hoped perhaps you were not Aes Sedai despite your rings. A foolish hope. I could feel the strength of you both, and now the White Tower will know. I cannot promise to keep your secret, but I will do what I can." The woman deserved more. "Jorin, I swear by the honor of House Drakund of Andor that I will do my best to keep your secret from any who would harm you or your people, and that if I must reveal it to anyone, I will do all in my ability to protect your people from interference. House Drakund is not without influence, even in the tower, and I will make Lauren use it, if need be, somehow. If it pleases the light," Jorin said fatalistically, "all will be well. All will be well, and all will be well, and all manner of thing will be well, if it pleases the light." There was a Damani on that Shanshan ship, wasn't there? The Windfinder gave her a quizzical look. One of the captive women who can channel. You see deeply for one so young. That is why I first thought you might not be Aes Sedai, because you are so young. I have daughters older than you, I think. I did not know she was a captive. That makes me wish we could have saved her. Wave Dancer outran the Shan vessel easily at first. We had heard of the Shan and their vessels with ribbed sails, that they demanded strange oaths and punished those who would not give them. But then the
All right, everyone. I'm gonna call Answer's Live for tonight. I want to thank everyone for stopping by and everyone who keeps stopping by. I appreciate all y'all's support. Until next time, everyone. Y'all stay safe out there.